Everyone, it is 5:40 and we're going to call the special organizational school board meeting to order. And we'll start with roll call.
Charles Blacklands, Kevin Boyles,
Present.
Tom Hageland,
Here.
Ruth Nelson,
Here.
Jana Shogren,
Here.
Sarah Spear.
Here.
I have about a 6 present.
Okay, thank you. And Director Blacklands will be here shortly. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes, it's over here. Oh, tonight. Been on us. Okay. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. We are recording this meeting, and you can monitor it from a remote location, and the access will be available on the school district's website. And it looks like we are fine with our seating. Please observe social distance and keep your masks on. And I think that's all I need to say. So first off, we have the approval of the agenda as presented. And we do not need to do number 5, the school board member oath of office, because none of us are new to the board for this year.
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you, Director Shogren.
Second. I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Director Spear. Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And I was hoping Director Blacklands would be here, but we're going to have nominations and elections of officers following policy 202. So first we have a motion for the chairperson.
I'll move to nominate Director Nelson for chairperson.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a first from Director Hagelin and a second from Director Shogren to nominate Chair Nelson for the new chairperson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, we have nominations for vice chairperson. And as he walks in, I will nominate Director Blacklands.
I'll second that nomination.
Okay, we have a first from Director Nelson and a second from Director Boyles. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Congratulations.
Don't wait, you get appointed vice chair.
You showed up just in time. And next up, we have a motion, we need a motion for the clerk. I'll nominate Director Shogren.
I'll second that.
So we have a first from Director Nelson, a second from Director Spear for Director Shogren to be our clerk. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And next up, we have we need a motion for the treasurer.
I'll make a motion to nominate Director Boyles.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. So we have a first for Director Boyles to be our treasurer from Director Spear and a second from Director Shogren. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Wonderful, we have our slate of directors remaining the same as it was at the end of this last year. So next up, we have a bunch of approvals for official depository, facsimile signatures, investment of surplus funds. We kind of combined these all to make it a little easier, so you probably have read through them all. So we need a motion And this will be by roll call, so it's a resolution.
May I jump in for a moment as
Yes.
well? It also includes the resolution to look at the financial condition of the district. And again, basically what that does is it asks the administration of the school district to look at the financial condition and make recommendations regarding budget during the winter and spring of this year. And so I would recommend that we add that to it as well.
Okay.
If I may, because I will abstain on the first two due to conflict of interest, so I don't know if it matters if we want to pull that as a separate or not, but,
Okay, so the official depository and
yeah,
the,
with the listing of the banks.
so just the first one, I think, right?
The first two items on there, to list all the banks.
Oh, okay, okay. So let's take those two first. The designation of the official depository and the approval of authorization of the use of facsimile signatures.
I can make that motion.
Thank you, Director Sjogren.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Director Boyles. Any discussion? Director Hagelin will be abstaining. We have a first from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Boyles. All in favor, say aye.
The roll call?
Oh, roll call, thank you. Roll call, Janet?
Charles Black Lance,
Yes.
Kevin Boyles,
Yes.
Tom Hagelin abstaining, Ruth Nelson,
Yes.
Jana Shogren,
Yes.
Sarah Spear,
Yes.
5 all in favor with
Thank-
1 abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the second will be the resolution for the financial condition of the district.
Make that motion?
Thank you, Director Hagelin.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Black Lance. Any discussion? Hearing none. This is a roll call vote also.
Kevin Boyles,
Yes.
Tom Hagelin,
Yes?
Ruth Nelson,
Yes.
Jana Shogren,
Yes.
Sarah Spear,
Yes.
Charles Black Lance,
Yes.
all in favor?
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Next up is the approval of our official newspaper, being the Brainerd Dispatch.
I'll move to approve the Brainerd Dispatch as the official newspaper.
I'll second that.
First from Director Boyles, second from Director Spear. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then approval of our school district legal representation, and this will be a roll call of Rupp, Anderson, Squires, and Walsberger.
I would also like to add in here that they would be the primary representation for the school district. However, the superintendent or administration have the authority at their discretion to ensure that adequate legal representation is there available for specific or unique expertise. And so an example of that would be with our building project. We've often used legal counsel that have that specific expertise alongside with Rep. Anderson, Squires, and Wellsberger. But so I just want to make sure that that is identified.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve the official school district legal representation.
Thank you.
Second?
First from Director Spear, a second from Director Hagelin. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please, Janet?
Tom Hagelin,
Yes.
Ruth Nelson,
Yes.
Jana Shogren,
Yes.
Sarah Spear,
Yes.
Charles Black Lance,
Yes.
Kevin Boyles,
Yes.
all in favor?
Thank you. Motion approved. Next up is approval of the 2022 Board of Education compensation. And the recommendation here is $4,800 per year. And that is an increase from last year.
It's the
An
first
increase from 1983.
Right, correct. Yep, the first increase since then.
I'll move to approve the 2022 Board of Education compensation.
I'll second it.
First from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Spear. Any discussion?
Just a note to add for the benefit of the public. With the changes that we made probably 3 or 4 meetings ago, where we, in effect, at the end of this calendar year, have eliminated all other district benefits for school board members. This is quite literally the only compensation that the 6 of us receive from the school district for what we do up here.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Several, but I'll abstain from sharing those.
Okay, we have a motion, first from Director Shogun, a second from Director Spear. All in favor for our compensation for the following year to be $4,800, say aye.
I
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of board members' rights to employment is outlined by MSBA. So this just tells us that we can make up to $8,000 a year in a employment relationship with the school district, which I don't think any of us have ever done, but if you wanted to be a scorekeeper or something, an ump or a ref.
Just to be clear, I'll coach sometimes for
Okay.
middle school, so that's,
That would be included if you,
If you're paid, yes, you just can't make more than $8,000. Yep.
Yeah, and any of us that want to substitute teach, you would be welcome, so.
Or drive bus,
Or drive bus, yes.
right?
will move to approve.
Thank you,
I'll
Director
second.
Hagelin.
I'll second.
Thank you. First from Director Hagelin, a second from Director Blacklatz. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Those, same sign for those not in favor. Motion carries. Okay, now we're going to readopt the school board policies as previously adopted. So that's just readopting all of our existing policies.
Move. So move.
Second?
That was a first from Director Hagelin, second from Director Boyles. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of the superintendent of schools being identified as the official local educational authority for the Minnesota Department of Education for federal and state purposes for recertification.
Move to approve as presented?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Hagelin. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then this final one might take just a little bit longer. It's all of our date, times, and places of our regular board meetings, our lead representations, and our district and community representatives. So if anyone has any discussions you received previously, the outlines for all of those, any changes or any concerns? You're looking at me puzzled, Director Blacklatz.
Well, I just, I'm fine with the times and that, but it was more of just a question which I could have asked before the board meeting. It didn't come to me until just now. Is, do we ever do, or is the history ever of the school board meetings being held off-site in the aspect of accessibility for some that may want to come, but it's a bit hindrance with jobs or family and whatnot?
Yeah.
Occasionally, I don't know.
We have in the past, we actually talked about doing it at the different schools. But I know because of how we record and everything, it's gotten a lot more complicated to do that. But I'm sure we do have some other areas, if they had the right technology, we could look at it in the future.
I guess maybe if at some point, obviously not today, but the
Okay.
conversation about that might be worthwhile.
Right. And right now, we just have one regular school board meeting per month, except for this month on the agenda, and then we'll add special meetings and work sessions as needed. So that's the change from last year.
And I'd just like to reiterate as well that we went to 2 board meetings when the referendum passed, with the agreement at that time that when we got pretty close to being done with the building project and didn't need so much time for certifying and approving things to keep the construction going, that we would go back to 1 regular meeting, and then any other meetings would be special meetings or work sessions, like you said. And so we're just following through with what we had agreed to in 2018. I would also like to note that when construction on this, because it kind of goes with what you were asking.
That's a good
When
point.
construction begins on this building in, what we're thinking October of this year, but again, that's kind of, we're still waiting on that to know exactly. But at that time, we are going to have to move the location of the meetings. And so that would be a great time that the board could talk about, do you want to do it in the schools, or is there another area that we would do that? But we would have to set up the technology since we do our meetings online and be able to do that. But that would be a great opportunity to at least try it and see how you
Yeah, and I
think
would
it
like,
works.
I would like to move it around a little bit if we could, so I
Well, and we
like
have
that
bigger spaces
suggestion.
now, too,
Yeah.
in some of the facilities. Yeah.
Okay. So, anything else on any of these items?
I
Okay,
think the only thing I would add is, having been around a year now, and when we approved this time last year, it was new to me. I think sometimes we get questions in the community about special board meetings and lack of public comment and that sort of thing, and that these regularly scheduled meetings are the ones that the community now knows about a full year in advance, or a full calendar, and that's when public comment's allowed. And the term special board meeting, I think, is confusing sometimes. There's really nothing special about them necessarily, just that we need an extra meeting sometimes to tend to a certain issue, and it comes up. So I just think that's just a good clarifying point for people who are worried that we're doing it for any other reason than that there just needs to be a meeting in a more timely manner.
thank you for that clarification.
I think special just sounds strange in a way, but I get that's our terminology, but it's just a additional meeting or extra meeting or not previously scheduled meeting.
Correct.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion to approve these?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Director Blacklands.
I'll second.
Thank you, Director Sjogren. We have a first from Director Blacklands, a second from Director Sjogren. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we need a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So move.
Thank you. Did I hear a second?
I'll make a second.
Okay. First from Director Boyle, a second from Director Spear. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion adjourned, or meeting adjourned. And what time do we have?
5:57.
Okay.
We held the meeting off about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, thank you. So sorry.
It worked out perfect.
Perfectly. You bet.
So is everyone okay just to start the regular meeting? Or do you think we need to wait till 6 o'clock?
Should wait till 6.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes for a break if anyone needs one. Okay, now we'll begin our regular school board meeting, and we'll start with roll call.
Charles Blacklands.
Here.
Kevin Boyles,
Here.
Tom Haglund,
Here?
Ruth Nelson,
Here.
Shanna Shogren,
Here.
Sarah Spear,
Here.
all present.
Okay, thank you very much. And you heard the announcement in the earlier meeting, so I won't repeat that. And as far as the agenda goes, we do have a couple of amendments. We have, unfortunately, we added number 9 and number 10 to this agenda, and then under action items, number 4. Thank you. So those are the changes to our agenda.
I'll move to approve the amended agenda.
Second?
Thank you. A first from Director Hagelin, a second from Director Boyles. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those approved, against, same sign. Motion carries. And we'll start with our Blueprint 181 update. Damian Williams, Zion Scott. You are the two tonight?
We are the two, yes.
Okay. Welcome.
I like your vest.
Well, thank you.
Very nice.
It's fashionable and practical. All right, this is our bond improvements update for January 10th, 2022. And all we have tonight is project updates. So we're gonna take it up with Brainerd High School with Scott Whittemore.
All right, well, this is an old picture from last week. Since then, Area 9, our exterior doors and glass are shipping January 12th, which is about time. We'll get them on at the end of this week or next, and that will finish up the Ox Gym area. Area 10, we're down to finishes, so Aqualogic's there. They're gonna start etching. Painting is finished, the mural's complete. Everything looks really nice in there. We got the railings are going up. You can see from there we've got the temp railings down. And then the stadia seating will start installation next week. Greenhouse, we have the training on the 13th. In Area A, we are in procurement and reviewing submittals.
So just for the clarification of the audience, the photo is of the pool area?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And there- Oh, you have the, yeah.
Yeah.
Got the graphics installed and starting to take shape.
Yeah.
Nice.
And South Campus, so Area A, we are taping, sheetrocking, and completing all of our soffits. Area B, rough-ins are completed. We're gonna start pulling wires and finishing the roof replacement. Obviously, the weather's been a little bit of a deterrent to getting the roofing completed with the snow, but we're working through that. Area C, sheetrock is hung. We ran out of our high-impact gyp, and we won't get more until January 15th. However, on January 15th, we'll get the remainder of the sheetrock for the job. So a little bit of a supply hiccup there, but we'll have it all by the 15th of January. Area D, which is the gym, we're foamed out, applying incandescent paint. E, which is the middle school and elementary school portion of the building. Our HVAC and plumbing rough-ins have started. We're just waiting on the remaining 4 door frames to be delivered. And just as a side note, we're being impacted by about 20% of our crew is currently out with COVID or COVID-related symptoms at South Campus. So a little bit of a hit to productivity to lose that much of the crew, but it is the dynamic that we're working with. So all things considered, going very well. Installing materials as we get them. And that is just Area A, primarily.
All right, Garfield, landscaping, we're gonna complete that work in the spring. Wood gym flooring is installation is starting tomorrow, and it's about a 3-week duration to get that squared away, so.
So just to clarify any misconceptions that might be out there, the students should be able to use that gymnasium in about 3 weeks, correct?
Correct.
Right around the beginning of February?
Yep.
So we'll be doing some transportation here to Wesby to use the gym services for a short period of time, and then they'll be back to their school.
Correct.
Yep, great.
Correct. And Kyle Walter has done a great job of just finding manpower for that.
Yep.
Help working with H2I and Brada Brothers to to get a crew sooner. They were actually talking about that install not happening till the end of the month, so we finally found someone. Let's see, punch list is 92% complete. We're waiting for a couple items yet. We're still waiting for our window blinds, and we're also waiting for our coiling door. Just material delays that we're facing, so, but we're working through that. The Brayer Learning Center, we've submitted for permitting or for plan review for the state, so that's underway. Looking to get their comments back, probably be 10 or 12 weeks before we see their comments back, but the process has started. We're working with Sourcewell right now to receive pricing for the project, and then they're working through High Tech through Sourcewell, so, and doing their competitive bid process that they provide. And then preliminary logistic planning has started for the project, so.
So that'll be a summer project.
Correct, yep. And then the Washington Educational Services Building, design development drawings are in progress. Feedback from the community ed user group meeting was incorporated into the documents, or is being incorporated. And the mechanical equipment strategies were reviewed with the design team and district. And when we're talking about that, we're working through the phasing options of how we're gonna work through this building and possibly still have use or occupancy while we work through it. So we're trying to strategize on what we can and can't do to keep occupancy. And that is it. Any questions at all?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe just a quick one from
Yes, sir.
logistics on our bi-weekly meetings. We'll probably just have those monthly now prior to. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that at the next POT meeting to see if we wanna still do those bi-weekly or bi-monthly, or if we want to.
We're going to try to shorten the presentations at the board, these presentations that they're giving, since there's one board meeting a month. So it'll be up to the project oversight team if they want 1 or 2 meetings.
Okay.
So we don't have one tomorrow. There's a
Not tomorrow, no, a week from tomorrow.
Great.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
okay, thanks.
Okay, next up we have recognitions.
Okay, it's very exciting tonight. We've got a couple recognitions that we're very excited to announce. Once again, congratulations to our students. Congratulations to Sean Bowman on the trombone, Abigail Benson on the clarinet, Michael Howe on the clarinet, and Abby Pratt on the alto II choir for participating in the Minnesota Music Educators Association, or MMEA, All-State Ensembles. The MMEA's All-State is considered the top program of its kind across the nation, which develops the high school musicians and school music programs. The All-State program supports secondary school music ensembles, MMEA members, and members' students. So congratulations to those 4 students. Also, congratulations to the Brainerd Warrior cheerleaders, Elizabeth Knutson and Bailey Schuler, as they both made the 2021-22 All-State Competitive Cheer Team. So congratulations to those students tonight.
Yes, congratulations. And congratulations to our choir and band and orchestra directors for all the work they do with those students.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
Yep.
we have an awesome programs. Okay, next up, public input. This is the time I have the comment cards up here, so I will call you up, and you'll be limited to 3 minutes, and please do not talk about any specific people. If you have any complaints, those should go to the superintendent privately. So first we have John Erickson. He is a community member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In 1936, James Agee lived among tenant farmers in Depression, Alabama, learning about their courage when faced with enormous challenges. His resulting book, Let Us Now Praise Famous Men, was published in 1941. By 1941, Brainerd had constructed 4 high schools, 1 junior high, and 8 elementary schools. 13 public schools since inception of public education on Minnesota's frontier about 70 years earlier. Contemporaneous reporting over those years extolled our always forward-looking public school system, including our progressive administrators and innovative teachers, and the determined uses of cutting-edge technologies and educational techniques. 80 more years have elapsed, and that forward-looking coalition of the first 70 years has continued to build facilities and educate our children with the same wisdom and foresight. Tonight I say, let us now praise the famous men and women who are you, who now lead Brainerd Public Schools with that wisdom and foresight which have always characterized public education here. Let us now praise you for furthering the splendid history of quality, thoughtful, decisive public education in this place. Let us now praise you, as always has been the case here, for your commitment to the public education of our youth, readying them not for our yesterdays, but for their tomorrows. Let us now praise you for recognizing that the class of 2022 is characterized by its diversity in the world of 2022, not by its non-diversity, as was the case of the class of 1872 in the world of 1872. Let us now praise you for readying our youth to become citizens of other main streets, even more diverse than our main street, and not just for our main street. Let us now praise you for realizing that the world, because of the technology and mobility of 2022, is already here, unlike the distant world of 1872. Let us now praise you for your commitment to public education, characterized by the words on the wall behind you, which we can't see. Opportunity for all, not for some. Innovation, not historical denials of reality, stagnating intellectual curiosity. And success of our students based on your leadership in 21st century scholarship, not 19th century stultifying, harmful dogma. So let us also praise you for educationally readying all of our students today for all of their lives tomorrow. Thank you.
And next up, thank you, John Erickson. Next up, we have Daryl Peterson, and he is also a community member.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'd like to say what John just said. But I come from a little different perspective. I would speak as a person who has lived in this district for over 30 years, moved here with my wife and children. All three of our children have graduated from the district and are doing well in the world beyond. My wife was an employee of the district for several years before retiring a couple of years ago. I've been a pastor in this community for that long and have spoken with many, many families, hundreds of children and so on, and would just like to say thank you so much for the faithful work that has been done by the staff and faculty of this district, by the school board and the administrators of this district. We are so proud for what has been accomplished despite economic setbacks and failures of state funding to come through and all the kind of things that have happened over the years. I'm very pleased with the work that you do, and thank you very much for being faithful and advocating for truth and for the full factual history of our country and for the health and safety of the students and staff and community. Thank you.
And next up, we have Terry Frovic, another community member.
Should I just say I agree with the other two? I first want to say congratulations to your reorganization meeting and the new leadership, the new officers, and the new board member. Last year was a roller coaster of issues that you all dealt with. And as a new, I'm not here for a lifetime like Daryl is, but I'm here with new eyes and grateful for your leadership. So my comment is basically, when there are issues that continue to come up, like for example, critical race theory, which you've heard over and over. You know, that's a teaching moment, and this is a school board. It might have, it maybe still could happen that we have a public information meeting whereby we learn. We don't have to engage in discussion about it. We just come and learn. What is critical race theory? I think that would have helped in the process of public input for the school board. That's just a suggestion that there are times when we have teachable moments. And the last thing I want to say is thank you so much for the struggle that you undertake to balance the important, the really critical important in-school teaching in the midst of this pandemic with the threat of more illness because of COVID-19. I just want you to know, I understand the delicate balance that it takes to make the right decision. So thank you for last year, and go get them this year.
And our last public comment is from Richard Dash? Dosh, okay, thank you. And you're also a community member.
That's right. And I got a comment on pandemic that we're having right now. How many have lived through a pandemic? I have. 1940. The polio pandemic. And you know what? Every one of us that were going to school at that time, in order to go to school, had to be vaccinated. Now, right now, we're going online learning. You know what that's doing? Giving everybody the chance to go online learning. Their kids don't get vaccinated. And what's happening? It's running everybody's bill sky high, including mine. I think everybody, it goes clean up to the federal government, state government, federal government. Online learning, online learning. Why do not everybody get vaccinated and be done with it? Get rid of the pandemic. It'd only take about a year and we'd be done with it. When the polio vaccine come out, in 2 years, it was gone. This has been going on now for 2 years. And if the kids don't, right now the hospitals are getting filled up with kids from 6 to 12 years old. They're not vaccinated. And what does that happen? They take it home and their younger kids get into the pandemic. Our hospitals are full of kids right now. I think I got vaccinated. I'm still wearing a mask, but I got vaccinated. Now you start bringing the kids into school, in-house learning, and the kids are going to end up just flooding these hospitals.
30 seconds remaining.
So I think everybody ought to be vaccinated. we had trouble with the polio vaccination. I had a sister that come down this gone beret after getting a polio sugar cube. She spends 3 months in the University of Minnesota hospital.
3 minutes, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay,
But she's still around.
thank you for your comments. And that's all we have, unless you have any more? Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. And we'll go on to the approval of the minutes from the regular school board meeting on December 13th.
Move to approve. I'll second.
First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklatz. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And next up, we have the consent calendar.
I move to approve.
Thank you, Director Blacklatz.
I'll second.
First from Director Blacklatz, a second from Director Spear. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same motion. Motion carries. And next up is one of our additions, and I hate to even read this, but our superintendent, Lane Larson, has announced her retirement effective June 30th. And we all received the letter from her. And this is difficult, and but would you like to say a few things?
I would.
Okay.
I haven't anything prepared ahead of time, but first of all, I just want to thank everyone for your partnership. This has just been an absolutely wonderful 6 years, partnering together to make a difference on behalf of our children in our school district, on behalf of our staff, and on behalf of our community. When I finish this school year, I will be finishing just under 40 years in public education. I started out in North Dakota for just less than 1 year, and then I've spent 39 years in public education in greater Minnesota. In a small school, a medium-sized school, and now a large school of Brainerd. And I can tell you that there has been nothing more rewarding to me than to spend my life profession working on behalf of our kids. And our decisions might not always be easy. They might not always be perfect. But everyone I know that I work with in this district and throughout Minnesota is here for the right reasons, because they want to provide the highest quality education for our children, for our future, as was talked about during the public comment tonight. And so I can tell you that I've always said that I'm proud to be a teacher, because I always consider myself a teacher, because I believe teaching is the greatest and most important profession in the world, because we all get where we are because of teachers that made a difference in our life. I also want to thank the board for putting your trust in me 6 years ago. Like I said, this was a dream come true when I was selected to come to Brainerd. And I want to assure our community that this board is the right board to select the next leader of the Brainerd Public School District. And I have the greatest confidence that you will go through that same extensive process that it takes to find that leader, and that you will do your due diligence to make sure that we are doing what's best for our kids as we move forward. And I'll be behind you cheering all the way along. I also want to thank everyone. I talk about it all the time. It's a community partnership, and it goes starting with our awesome kids. You know, every week, every board meeting, I get to announce the wonderful contributions that our kids have made. Our incredible staff, and when I talk about staff, I am talking about every single person that makes a difference for our kids. Our bus drivers, our cooks, our custodians, our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our administration. I often say we're all teachers. We're all here to make a difference in the lives of children, and we do. I also want to thank the parents. We have incredible parents and supportive parents throughout our community, and this incredible community that comes and helps us every time we need it. You know, I think back to the referendum. How many things I'm proud of the work that we've done in the 6 years, but not many, you know, we passed what I believe is the largest bond referendum in greater Minnesota that I have seen record of. And it's because of that community partnership where everybody came together to make that difference. And I'm really proud of that. And I also am very, very proud of the courageous leadership I look out into the audience and I see many people that I work with every day, and the last 22 months have been hard. And the courageous leadership that the board has shown, that everyone has shown, to keep our schools healthy, to keep our children learning in school, as this gentleman talked about a little bit ago, there's nothing we want more. And so I can tell you, and I'm going to cut it short here, but I can tell you that it is with my heartfelt appreciation that I say thank you to you, to each of you, for contributing and for partnering with me and for believing in me so that we can make a difference in the academics, in the arts, in the facilities, in the technology, with our health and safety in our district, and we could do it together as a united partnership. And so I will always be a Brainerd warrior, and as I put in my letter, I will finish strong. I will lead till the last day I am here, because that is the warrior way, and that is something that I learned here. So thank you, everyone, for believing in me, and I love you all. That's all. My husband retired a little over a year ago, and so now we're kind of looking forward to what's that next chapter look like for us and our family, and getting involved in the community in a little bit different aspect. But I'm really looking forward to that time with him and looking at that next chapter in our life together. So thanks again.
And Lane, you should be very, very proud of your work and your whole
Thanks.
career.
Thank you.
It's an impressive.
Yeah. That's a long time.
Yeah.
I told Jan, I said the worst part about saying that it's almost 40 years is that means I'm really old.
No.
So that's a long time. So anyway. But
I was hoping I could convince you into signing another contract, but,
yeah.
but
It's time.
Yeah.
And we're in a great place. This district is in the perfect place. And like I said, I have the greatest confidence in all of you that you will find, and you will go and you will find the best leader to lead for the next however many years. So I have the greatest confidence.
we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah, it'll be good. Thanks.
So with that, I need a motion to approve.
Good luck.
Happens if we don't approve it.
I will regretfully move to accept Superintendent Lane Larson's resignation effective June 30th.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thanks.
So we have a first from Director Boyles and a second from Director Blacklands to approve the retirement of Superintendent Lane Larson effective June 30th. Any further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Good, thank you, Lane. Okay, next up, we have the approval to direct the Human Resources Director to solicit information on Minnesota superintendent searches and to bring forth information to the board chair prior to the, and I would say vice chair, prior to the January 24th, 2022 meeting of the Board of Education. And I'd also like to say that I'm hoping that we can maybe set up some meetings at our conference to meet with some search firms. So we'll work on that too.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. First from Director Spear, a second from Director Sjogren. Any further discussion? None, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed, same sign, motion carries. Okay, and now we'll go on to new business, and we have our annual audit report with Mary Reedy and Marcy Lord.
Good evening. We have some new board members here, so Mary, if you want to do a little introduction while I bring this up.
Okay, I'm Mary Reedy, the principal on the audit engagement for the year. CLA, the audit firm, has been auditing the school for a few years now. And then we like to go over a PowerPoint presentation. We do give you the financial statements, so you can go ahead and We like to call it nighttime reading, kind of makes you go to sleep. So that's why we do the PowerPoint. It's a little bit easier, gives you some comparisons, some years to go back to see how the district has done and how it's doing moving forward. Definitely interactive, so as we go through this information, feel free to stop us at any time and ask us questions.
All right.
Perfect. So the first thing on the agenda is to go over some required communications. Now, we go over this every year. Our primary responsibility as auditors to provide an opinion on the fairness of the financial statements presented tonight. We do review internal accounting controls, so we want to make sure that the district has controls in place, and then we want to make sure that they're working. If they're not working, we'll inform the board of that. Risk-based audit approach, obviously we can't test every transaction, so it still wouldn't be done by now. So we do some detail level transaction testing, and then we do some comparisons, current year to prior year, current year to budget. If anything looks out of the ordinary, we do a few more detail testing in that as well. We do test the federal awards. You'll see this year you almost doubled in those federal dollars. So we did test some more of those. Make sure that the district was in compliance and that you had controls in place over that money and process as well. Significant accounting policies, those are outlined in note 1. Within the bound document, we just like to remind everyone that there are judgments and accounting estimates in there. Special education aid obviously doesn't get shored up until this year, so we don't want to hold the audit out for that. We work with management, get that best estimate in there. And it goes for all of these. The net pension liability is your other big one. That's your TRA and para liability. That does get adjusted each year. We get new numbers and we run that through the report every year based on district contribution throughout the year. No disagreements with management. No difficulties encountered in performing the audit. Obviously, as you have seen, you have a lot of work going on, a lot of bonds issued. Each year, you continue to issue those to kind of help get each project through. So a lot is undertaken, which is why the audit takes a little bit longer with those millions and millions of dollars being spent. Okay. Within the financial statements, we passed on 2 immaterial adjustments. Just the inventory balance, when we came in to do those adjustments, we counted something different than was on the list. But overall, immaterial there. And then revenue recorded should have been unearned versus revenue earned. And again, immaterial, so we just passed on it. So it's just more informative of those. Okay. Summary of the overall audit results, so an unmodified or a clean opinion on the financial statements, so highest level of assurance that us as auditors can give. 2 material weaknesses. 1 is common preparation of financial statements. We do prepare the bound document. We do have management review that. We want to make sure they are in agreement with the numbers, and then they add some of that commentary within the bound document as well. And then material audit adjustments. Just ran out of time to get those last few adjustments made. When we came in to do the audit, we suggested a few of those be made, and so we flowed those through at the time of the audit. That eventually will go away as well when the duties in this building project are completed. No issues noted under the government auditing standards. And then the uniform guidance, so that is your single audit, the federal program that I talked about. So if you spend over $750,000 in federal award, we do have to test some of those programs. This year you can see we picked the Education Stabilization Fund and the Coronavirus Relief Fund. So 2 brand new programs to the district overall and 1 finding. So to have 2 brand new programs like that and have to monitor them and run them and have 1 finding, not bad at all. So as far as compliance, you're in compliance with everything. There's just a control piece of it that was missed, but the district overall was in compliance. Everything was allowable and authorized per the grant programs. So clean in that regard.
And going forward, that is something that can be fixed too, and now that we know that that should be reviewed.
Yes. It's all about the review. We always want 2 people on it, and sometimes you just don't think about it. You just submit it, and you just need to get it done. So, But yes, definitely will be fixed for next year. Minnesota Legal compliance, so we test a long checklist to make sure the district's in compliance with all of those, and no findings noted there either. So we'll get into some of the actual numbers here. So for 2021, you can see far left, this is for your general fund, and then going back to 2017. So again, you can kind of see how the district has progressed. This year, revenues of 89 million. That was about 1.1 million above budget. Expenditures of 85.5 million. Those are about 5.5 million below budget. Okay, so when you look at that, that created revenues over expenditures of 3.9 million there, positive. So you actually budgeted for loss of about 2.7 million. Okay, so you came out quite a bit better than expected. Unassigned fund balance increased the most there, up to 10.8. When you compare that to your total expenditures, you're at about 12.6%. Your policy is about to have 10%. So you are meeting and exceeding your fund balance policy right now. Okay. Restricted fund balance at 5.6 million. Your largest increase there was your operating capital. So you did put some money in there, which I'm guessing going forward will be spent. So it's in there for a short time.
So just on the unassigned fund balance, is most of those dollars from the additional COVID dollars that even though they're called unassigned, they're kind of limited in how we can spend them?
So we were able to reassign some of our current expenses into the CARES dollars, which helped our unassigned. And then we also had, she talked about the difference from budget. Several of our budget items were just on a normal year, but it wasn't a normal year. We came in under because of the change in models.
Okay.
So I did want to comment on that as well. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Yeah, so unassigned is truly unassigned. If you had that additional COVID funding left over, it's going to be in your restricted line.
Okay.
But what Marcy's saying is she found allowable costs that you normally would have had that COVID actually qualified for, and so you were able to put those against that instead.
Yeah, and the fund balance policy, we talked about this last year, and there were some concerns about meeting the 10%, so that's awesome that we're meeting it. You guys are gonna hear me say that I wanna increase it again, just because, as you know, we've talked about, ideally it'd be 3 months, 25%, so we would like to keep upping that if we can, keep setting a higher goal.
Yeah, because at 12%, you're just shy of 2 months right now. So the next page, just what I had talked about, general fund, unassigned fund balance per ADM here. So you can see you're just under 1,800 per your ADMs. And then again, remember that your ADMs decreased while your fund balance increased. So the gap looks really large here, but it is because you had that decrease in ADMs as well, and hoping to obviously get that ADMs back up the next year. And then this page is your percentage of unassigned fund balance here to expenditures. So again, 10% is your policy, and you haven't been meeting that since 16-17. So 2021 is the first year in a couple of years that you've been over the policy. Next page is your food service fund on top. Here again, far left is 2021. So 3.4 million of expenditures. Those are under budget by about 278,000. Expenditures are 3.3 million, under budget by about 479,000. So actually net change in fund balance positive 163,000, and you budgeted for a loss of 38,000. So a little bit unique with food service. You were all meals were federally funded, so you didn't have to worry about no collections. And you actually were reimbursed at a higher rate because federal paid you more than what you had been getting from the state. So a lot of our districts actually did see this large increase in fund balance just because the expenditures weren't quite there either, right? You were able to monitor that and keep those down as well. The only thing in food service is it has to be spent on food service. And you won't always see the fund balance increase like you have. So when you're thinking about how to spend that money, remember you just want those one-time expenditures because the revenue is not going to keep offsetting those expenses. Community Service Fund right below there, 2021, 2.9 million of revenues, about 214,000 under budget. Expenditures at about 2.9 million. Those are 582,000 below budget. So you came out with a loss of about 31,000, but you budgeted for a loss of 398,000. So you actually did better than expected. And if you look back, you did better than the last 2 years as well. So you ended your fund balance with about 1.2 million there. And if you looked in community service, all of your categories within community service fund are positive as well. So even though you've lost in the past, you've been able to maintain by category as well.
And it's the same as the general fund where we budgeted like a normal year. That's why the budget was off by that 500,000, just not knowing what programs we would provide. But so that's why it's under budget. If we didn't have a program, then there were no expenses.
So next page is your debt service fund. Here's where you levy for your principal and interest payments each year. So there'll be years where you're going to see the negative here. You're required to levy 105% of your principal and interest payments. And then the state kind of monitors the fund balance within that service fund, and they'll adjust that levy as necessary. So if you do see a loss, it's probably due to the state reducing the levy, because 105% should be enough to make all of those principal and interest payments.
Which is a good thing, because that means that taxpayers are paying their taxes more than what, you know, we levy the 105 in anticipation that maybe there would be some people not paying their taxes, but if we are getting money pulled back, that means they're keeping up on that.
Okay. In your capital projects funds, here you can see the millions of dollars going out and coming in. So your other financing sources and uses, those are going to be your bond proceeds. So as you go through there, you'll see those come in. Up top, you'll see the normal expenditures. So to see the huge deficits there, you're just spending down cash, and then you're offsetting that with the bond proceeds on the line underneath it. So right now, at the end of the year, you have about 48.8 million left to spend within the capital projects fund. Okay. Like I said, too, each year, so you can see in 18 you issued bonds, 19 you issued bonds, and then again in 21 you issued bonds too, depending on when your projects are taking place. Okay. So the next page just gives a pie chart of the sources of revenues for the district. So these are all funds combined. Again, federal is at 8% this year. Last year was at 4%. And then other local was at 8% last year and is at 4% this year. So when you factor in food service too, all of your food service money moved to federal. So that was part of that big shift, along with the new COVID money that you received.
And that other local, I also looked into, you know, as she said, the food service, and then part of it was interest earnings. You know, we had this huge amount of bond issuance from the capital projects, and we're earning very good interest on it. And now that the pot of money is going down, the interest on it is not, it's not earning as much. So that's part of the decrease in the other local as well.
The next page goes hand in hand with that, just shows you over the years. So sometimes it can, you know, like this federal is going to skew it for a little bit. If you see that, you can see it, you doubled this year in federal dollars. So the pie chart is good, but then when you look at this, you can really see where the changes were at. Another local decrease like we talked about, and then federal going up. State, you can see the decrease. You're going to see the decrease in students as we go through. And then I know a lot of it is compensatory as well. So continue to monitor that, encourage those applications to get turned in, because it does have other effects with your funding. So next page, breakdown of expenditures by program. So where's that revenue being spent? Okay. So again, your pie chart is going to be skewed a little bit with your sites, buildings, and equipment, right? You have a big project going on. So 44% there. Instructional service, 33%. But when you go to the next page, you can really see that all of those actually stayed fairly similar. And your sites and buildings decreased from last year there.
And I think last year we had a question on that admin going down, you know, why was it? And I just want you guys to know that when we got those CARES funds, part of that is we can charge back some of our time. And so there is a offset of the CARES funds versus admin, and that's why it keeps going down. So it is a little bit deceiving when you see that number going down.
The next one is the expenditures by object code. So we just like to show this because if you look at any given district, your salaries and benefits are gonna be the biggest piece of expenditures within the district, right? And we just like to highlight that because you do have those negotiations year over year, and those are gonna be the district's biggest expenses. Now, capital expenditures is skewing that right now, but it will go back to normal once you get done with your capital expenditures. So when you go to the next page, again, there's the bar chart there that you can see overall how each of those did. Salaries just decreasing a little bit with your benefits increasing slightly from last year then. So the next page, average daily membership, so how the district gets paid. Here you can see your drop-in students from 2020, about 6,500 down to about 6,200 there. In all of the districts that I have audited, I don't know that I've seen one that grew in 2021. So all of the districts did feel that in 2021. And then what I found out as well is that within these numbers, there's a lot of students that move to homeschool. So when you look at your resident students and you compare it in 21 to 20, the homeschooling is out completely from those numbers. So it may look like you dropped thousands of students, but in reality, they're just homeschooling. So they may not have left your district. So that's why there's potential that you grow those back once they come back from homeschooling and they come back into the district. So you can see that on the next page. So 5,800 resident students compared to 6,100 last year. And then your non-resident students actually dropped this year as well, about 39 there. So we always like to show too your open enrollment gain or loss, of course, because students can come in and go each year. So here you can see you did drop quite a bit from the prior years as well. So ended up losing 429 non-resident students coming in, and then your resident students opting out. Next one, we like to show your administration and district support per ADM. So here you can see 1920, ISD 181 is blue, state average is your lighter blue, and then districts of similar size is your green. So always a year behind. Obviously, we don't have the 2021 information yet. You can see that the district is well below each of those averages there.
So, Marcy, before I forget, on the previous slide on the opting out, at one time we were tracking at a high level the reasons why. Do we still have that information? Or?
If they put it in the comment section, we do have that tracked, but if they leave it blank, we don't have any record of why they left.
Okay, any idea of how many put something in there?
I could ask and find out. I don't think we've looked at that data recently. Last year was a big one. You know, we knew a lot of them went to homeschool.
Sure.
But as far as leaving the district, I don't think we've reviewed that for a while. We could look back at that.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking just in preparation for if out because of homeschooling, which would make sense to me, and if it has a lot to do with the pandemic and online learning that we had last year, that we might be able to anticipate what kind of a growth or those who would return when stability happens.
Yeah.
So that we're kind of prepared for that.
Yeah.
Have you seen what this year's numbers are yet? Are they going back up?
A little bit, not a lot.
It might be a slow start to get them back. So then, let me go back that one. Go to the last slide there. Total instruction per ADM. So putting the dollars back in the classrooms here, you can see you're above the state and some districts of similar size here. Okay, so that's what you want to see, is spending the dollars back in the classroom. The next one is your self-insurance fund here. Just wanted to show expenses in 1920 and 2021 we're down, considerably down, obviously due to the change in everything. Pretty self-explanatory here. And then revenues you can see went down from 1920 in 2021, which is consistent with your decrease in expenses, right? So last year you caught that it was going down. 2021 you collected less as well. Just to help offset with those reduction in expenses as well. And then the last one just kind of gives you the median of where you're at each year with net position here. So you gained a little bit, and then in 2021, just kind of holding steady there from prior year. And then just continue to monitor that and assess. Obviously, you've made changes as you needed to over the years. So.
And this one, the net position is well beyond 3 months, so we are not concerned about that fund balance.
So that was a brief overview. Hopefully, no surprises. Obviously, you're getting, financial information throughout the year. Definitely feel free to use that. It's good information, and you can make informed decisions off of that.
Just a quick comment. Thank you again, Mary, for the information on the future years. It might be helpful on the, we've got the historic numbers by fund, but if we had the budget right along that, I mean, we've got the budget information from presentations throughout the year, but just to see that, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mary? It's nice to see our unrestricted fund balance that high. Get too used to it. No, yeah, I know.
That's right. It's a little deceiving.
Yeah, I know it is. Oh, so we need an approval of that annual report as presented?
Second.
That was quick. First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Hagelin. Any additional questions from anyone? And I know you're always available if we do have other questions at a later time, after we totally digest all that documents. So we have I noticed in board book we have the detailed document. Do we also have this in there?
I can add it if you'd like.
That would be great, yeah, because there is some stuff I'd like to look at a little bit longer.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, and you get to stay up and talk about our trade home.
So in September 29th, you guys approved a listing agreement with Edina Realty. Brad Watson, he's great to work with. He worked out this purchase agreement. It is for closing on June 3rd. It's for the amount that was approved, $90,000. The $3,000 deposit was put down, and then also there's the pre-approval construction loan letter in there as well. Just looking for approval on that so that we can sign the document and do the closing on June 3rd.
I don't know if you know this, but where is that being built?
In the same, I believe the same spot it had in the past, yep.
Okay.
They had to redo, I believe, the base for it, but I believe it's in the same area.
Okay, I'll have to drive by and.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll move to approve the purchase agreement.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first from Director Sjogren, a second from Director Blacklance. Any further discussion? Good work on that.
That's all Brad. I can't take credit for that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Next up, we have our COVID presentation.
I look forward to a board meeting where I do not have to give a COVID presentation. Okay, so tonight's board meeting, what we're going to do, our presentation is going to look a little bit different because there's lots of additional factors to consider. So we're going to review our current data that's existing within our school district and our county. And at the last meeting, we discussed that due to take-home tests, that the county data isn't necessarily reflective of what's happening in the district. So what is a better way for us to make determinations? Another request was to prepare a phased proposal or outline of what we could do to start rolling back or putting face coverings to strongly recommend, and then also having to have guidance of what we would do when we would have to require a face covering to return. We've had a change with Osha and some testing guidance that's coming out, so we want to discuss that, as well as the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health have outlined and changed some quarantine guidance from us. So it's not going to be the 2 to 3 slides that I know Director Hagelin likes. It's a little bit longer tonight, so we apologize for that.
We'll talk fast.
We will. So just to kind of give you the current data, as of 8:30 this morning, so we haven't been able to go back, but we have currently 56 students who are positive and 109 in quarantine. And we have 28 staff that are positive and 2 staff that are in quarantine. Remember, our quarantine numbers do not include our positive cases. They are people who are quarantined either due to a close contact and are waiting short in quarantine within the home, or because of a prolonged exposure to a positive case. This is our current county data. So we've highlighted our 0 to 18 years of age. Those are the students that we focus on. You're starting to see a pretty stable pattern since the end of November, beginning of December on county data. But again, that does not include at-home testing. Most of the families that are calling us now and students that we're dealing with, because we have rapid take-home tests, a lot of our families are accessing and taking those take-home tests. So the county data does not reflect those, which is why we're starting to see that disconnect and the question that you raised at the last board meeting, what's a better way for us to look at our data? Just to stay with the method we have, so we have comparable data. This is what it looks like for cases per 10,000 in our school district compared to the county cases per 10,000. We do want to be cognizant, though, that we have minimal data for the week of December 24th to December 31st. Why? We weren't in session. Employees and students weren't here, so we do not have a lot of data to report to you, other than when they came back to school and reported that they may have had a positive case over the holiday break. So really what we'd like to start to propose when we look at our data, and this is data that we've started to present in the past, is how do we look overall? So this is our data from the beginning of the school year, starting September 1st all the way up to January 7th. And if you can look at, and the questions that you pose, so if you look at the end of November going into Christmas break, the blue line, that's the number of positives, we were starting to see those consistently go down, as well as the quarantine. If you look at this past week, which we anticipated, a holiday break where we've had families and people gathering in close quarters, we've seen a spike in those positive cases. You will note that it's the highest number of positive cases we've seen in a 1-week period since we started school. The difference in that right now is we are seeing an increase in our staff positives. Our student positives are staying pretty steady across, but we've seen a significant increase in our staff positives this last week. Quarantine then also mirrors that, just because of the close household contacts. But the other 2 lines that you see behind that, the more vertical lines, that's going to show you the overall trend data. So again, if you look, trend data, quarantines have stayed pretty consistent from September 1st to now January 7th. You'll see our positive cases are on a slight increase. That's really skewed on that increase line because of the significant spike in positives we experienced in the last week. Any questions about how we're representing that data? So we figured this is a better way to get a snapshot of what we recommend, and this is kind of the data trend that we're going to like to propose, or what we'd like to move to start looking at to consider decisions for our district. One of the questions you asked is, if we look at a face covering recommendation, what might be a phase or a phase plan that we could look at doing that? We made phase 1 go into place on November 10th, where we removed face coverings for after school activities for our 9-12 students. When we did that, we did not see a significant increase or spike in positive cases at the high school level. So if you look at our high school data, that's reflective in that. So trying to outline, and what we talked about is coming up with a phase plan, is really taking into consideration that we have had now 5-year-olds and greater have access to that vaccination if you have a family looking to be vaccinated. That did not exist for our families in August. So when we started to look at making a plan, really being cognizant of who's maybe had access to that availability of a vaccine earlier. So our 9th through 12th graders obviously have had greater access then our middle school students have had access, and now our 5 to 11-year-olds have had access to, readily have had access to vaccination if a family would choose since mid-November. So how could you look at it? A next phase back plan, community facility use, non-school sponsored activities. For example, I'm looking at Anne Marie. We have a lot of facility rentals. I think we have the Trappers Association, Anne Marie. So organizations like that coming into our facilities in the weekend that are looking to rent the facilities really have nothing to do with the operation or interaction of our student and our staff. That could be potentially a next phase back. Looking at then 5 to 8 after school activities, again, we haven't seen that expansion when we removed from 9-12. Then looking at our oldest students first. They've had the longest access to being vaccinated, 9-12. Then the next phase back, 5-8, and then looking at early childhood to 4th grade after school activities, and then early childhood to 4th grade students. So it really would allow you a phased back plan based on the availability that families have had to make additional mitigation decisions for themselves and their families. So that's a proposal of how we could look at phases. Question is, all those to be determined dates, that's where we really have to discuss what should be considered when you do that. I just kind of reviewed these and why we would do this. The other thing to keep in mind, and Angie's going to cover this in a little bit, with the OSHA requirements, there's some significant implications for face coverings and staff. And we'll get into that later. That may influence the decision you make for face coverings for staff as you look at those phased across plans or abilities. So if you look at right now, we're going to give you a series of data. This is what our data looks for early childhood to elementary. So we really talked about trying to keep grade level or building level bands together. We would gather or lump our early childhood and elementary programs together. So that's why we're going to show you their data as they look. Again, you're seeing the same pattern. We've seen a significant spike the week, but overall, you can see how that trends. So going into Christmas break, decline, 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 decline. That's why we're asking really good questions about whether it's time or not. Now we've seen a spike, but you can see that overall trend, and that's kind of what skewed our data at the end there with the new data this week. Interesting about the middle school. Really, they've kind of been outside of the end of September. They've been a pretty consistent group when you look at their positives. Where we've seen a spike in positives right now at the middle school is more at a staff level than a student level. So again, that's where we do have the capability to dive down into data by building by grade level. So our middle school right now is kind of an interesting group. We saw them really positive and spiking at the beginning and then kind of stable through the rest of the year. And the high school, same thing. They kind of did that spike like the middle school at the beginning. They really decreased, and then we can see them decreasing into Christmas break, but a spike again now that we returned from break. So overall, their trend data is going up a little bit, but that's skewed by the end data on the first. We do have the capability to dive down and do this by building, week by week. And so again, if we want to discuss what decisions could be made by building or by grade level, we have the capability to do that. Our public also has access to do this. If we go to our district website and we click, and then it gets us right to the COVID dashboard. I'll blow this up so we can see it bigger. And then we can show, so that's the same data, but then we can look at, here's Baxter Elementary, again, from week 1 all the way to current, to Nisswa. So it does give us the ability to start making decisions based on our localized data. And again, we've had families ask because they really are curious about what's happening in their buildings. It's always right there. We moved from updating that data from Tuesdays to Fridays, just to align with some of the access we get with our local numbers. So the big question is, if you do make a decision to start rolling back face coverings, really then the magical question becomes, when do you put a face covering back on? And this goes back to the original matrix that we designed back in August. This is that influenza-like matrix that we discussed early on. We would go back to, this would be the side about positive cases. So when you start to see 0 to 1 cases in a classroom or minimal to no cases within that grade level or building, stay strongly recommend. Minimal cases 1 to 2, being more cognizant that you're starting to see them increase. Again, a few cases classroom 2 to 3 in a group of 30 students or less, consider mandating. And then when we start to see multiple classrooms, multiple grade level settings, or 3 or more in the classroom, going to required. The other layer we'd like to add to that is really when we look at, and this is what happens in addition, more so than just positive cases, if we're starting to see a large group of students having symptoms. So that's why we put the and/or. So you should really look at the positive cases and the percentage of students then within that classroom or within that grade level or within that program or building that are also experiencing symptoms. So you can go across that. The difficult challenge will be we can make different decisions based on the buildings that we operate. Within an elementary, it's very easy to do by a classroom. We can have that classroom be able to put their face covering back on. They can eat lunch within their classrooms. We can isolate their physical education activities. Same thing in early childhood. Kids are pretty much bound to their classroom level. You could also do it by grade level and by building level, just because all of our buildings are set up. In the middle school, really, when you make that decision, it's going to have to be based upon grade level or building level. Our 5th grade is isolated from our 6th grade, which is isolated from our 7th grade, isolated from 8. Very difficult to all of a sudden, hey, say we got to do this in Mrs. Smith's classroom when those kids are intermixing within their teams. So there's a lot of movement within their grade level in those buildings at the middle school. High school, really the only option would be to make it at a building level. We have 9-12 students that crisscross across multiple classes across 7 periods a day. So it'd be very difficult to isolate just a certain class in the high school level. At the Brainerd Learning Center and the Lincoln Education Center, decisions really could be made upon classroom or program-based. So again, we could dive into that data and really look to make those decisions. So there is a matrix because that really becomes the next piece of, once they go off, then when would be a recommendation to put them back on? And putting them back on really would be then that reset or that quarantine when you're looking for that contagious period. So that's going back to really where we started back in August. Any questions about that before I go to a bus update?
Heidi, could we go to the pod level at the middle school?
So like, we potentially could, like Team 5A, it just depends on, sometimes kids crisscross teams.
Yeah.
So we'd really have to look at what's happening within those student groups and really what's happening if we start to sense that there's an outbreak, right, really transmission with students within the class. We haven't really seen that yet this year. And honestly, our positive cases, it's very evident when you see it coming back in, household transmission. I mean, families were together over an extended holiday period. We're starting to see that reflected. But we could, I mean, we have the ability. For example, we've entered 2,100 students and staff into our tracker so far this year, so we could tell you exactly what date, what building, how many siblings, all those things.
Just a thought, if we're trying, once we move to this, if we're trying to be least restrictive, maybe pods.
Yeah, just like when there is a true influenza outbreak, we have the capability to backtrack that data. But again, just movement really can affect that. Any questions? Okay. So Kever is with us from Reichert's bus service. The good news is overall things are improving. Today we are just down one bus route. As at 7:30 last night, and the last time I checked in with Norby, they were 100% ready to roll, and then we lost a driver. So just like they said, it changes in a matter of minutes. But currently, right now, we have 2 drivers out for medical conditions. We're down 1 to 2 routes throughout this week. At this point in time, activities are all covered. A few trips have had a switch. They made that coach bus request, but they're going to get stuck on a school bus. When you're in high school, that's very disappointing, just because of issues in driver availability. Reichert's continues to do a great job in recruiting drivers. One's testing this week. They have another sub-driver getting ready to test, and then another new driver beginning training. I can tell you we have a staff member who's very proud to have his CDL license right now. So again, we've had some staff and community members jumping up and helping us out. So it's been a true strong collaborative partnership to continue to try to get us through. Because health issues are going to continue. That's just kind of where we're at. But we're starting to see some stability. We thought we'd be better right when we came out of the break last week, and not so much. This week we look much better. So, any questions?
And the requirement for masking on transportation goes through?
Yeah, the federal mandate is still in place till the end of March. Okay. So when you look at a face covering mandate, that's a federal, it's a transportation that'll have to be in through the end of March. And we haven't heard any changes since then yet. Okay, so the CDC has come out with additional recommendations regarding our quarantine guidance. And as of Friday, the Minnesota Department of Health and our Department of Education have agreed to adopt those. I'm going to have Angie cover this.
Oh, I thought you were going to take over for me. Darn it. She usually lets me just smile and nod. So this did come out over winter break, December 27th. I'm sure you guys heard CDC released a media statement saying they were going to reduce the quarantine period for positives. We paused initially because there were a lot of questions going around about its applicability to schools. Also, there was a lot of rumor mill going around that if they were going to add some more testing requirements to the rule. So what we wanted to do was make sure that we had full clarity around it, so we didn't change it and then had to change it back. And so we did pause for a bit. I did read over the weekend that on January 7th, MD and MDH did release that they're going to support and move towards adopting the guidance. So with that, we kind of discussed it, and we would like to do the same. Obviously, it would certainly help bring kids and staff back to school and work if they're having mild symptoms, as their symptoms are improving, and are fever-free, they can return. So we are in the process right now, even, as we speak, was reaching out to staff that now meet the eligibility to come back to work. It's a mixed bag at this point. Some are too sick still to come back to work. Obviously, we're not going to force them to come back, but it does give an opportunity for asymptomatic or someone with real mild symptoms that are showing improvement to have the ability not to miss out on work and school in person. So we will be working on continuing to reach out to families tomorrow morning. We are still looking on what does this mean for household members that were exposed to a positive, because right now we're operating under a shortened quarantine period. But what does that mean when we look at this for the positives? So we're still kind of working through those pieces. We're going to meet with the nurses and kind of get some feedback from them and then develop a pattern from there.
I think you do want to add, the reason the CDC is recommending these changes is they're finding that our individuals are most infectious 2 days before symptoms start. And that within those 5 days, they seem to see that infectious rate much greatly
lower.
Decreased. So.
But even with the return at 5 days, they are still saying wear your face covering for the last 5 days. Since we still have that in place, that becomes a non-issue at this point, but if we were to roll back, we would want to kind of advise our students and staff that would be returning early of that recommendation as well. Any other questions about that? Super duper.
There you go.
All right, Minnesota OSHA emergency temporary standards. So I'm sure you all heard back in November that the federal OSHA released emergency temporary standards in regard to vaccination, testing, and face coverings for employers with 100 or more employees. As I'm sure you've also heard, that was immediately followed by several court cases. There was a stay on the federal OSHA guideline until relatively recently, where it was dissolved and then was heard by the Supreme Court on Friday. The Supreme Court has not filed a ruling at this time. We've been advised that since Minnesota OSHA did approve by reference the federal OSHA guidelines, we need to proceed as if they're in place unless we hear differently from the Supreme Court. So right now, the effective date is today. And they let us know last week. So that was fun. We all knew it was coming. I was hoping it was going to be a bit, but here we are. And so right now, our timelines, really the impact to our staff at this point is in regard to face coverings. As we're currently wearing face coverings, there's not a whole large impact to our employees at this point. I did send out an update to our employees last week, letting them know that this was passed by the Minnesota OSHA and kind of what it looks like. Testing, so I will go into this more when we review the policy, but basically the ETS includes for fully vaccinated employees, technically wouldn't have to wear face coverings unless it was required by the employer, nor would they have to test weekly. They would need to provide their vaccination record to the employer in order to waive these parameters. If there is not a vaccination record that is submitted, every staff member would need to test at least weekly and show proof of their test results to the employer in order to be on site. They would also need to wear face coverings. There's lots of other provisions within the ETS that we'll go over when we discuss the policy, but this is just kind of a framework to be aware of, and also in consideration if we are to roll back the face coverings. If this were to continue moving forward, we would have to look at face coverings for staff that are currently haven't submitted a vaccination record. So just kind of something to consider there. This is not a voluntary standard, like we don't get to choose whether or not we want to follow it. That is something that we are required to follow.
And we have been asking staff all along to voluntarily submit their vaccination status. So we've been collecting those along the way, so we're also in compliance right now with the current mandate that's come through.
Any questions about that before we move on?
There's a lot in the policy.
There
I'll get
is.
into that. And then just last additional information. So we have rapid tests available for students and staff. We now are offering up to 2 test kits. Additional test kits have been given to families and students based on emergencies. We have another large, we've secured another large order of rapid tests that should be getting shipped here shortly. Our families can go into any building and talk to the building nurse and get those for their students. So if I have students across multiple buildings, I don't have to go to the buildings, just go to one. As we start to get further in this policy, we're gonna look at more testing options for staff and students, and we'll communicate those in the future. And we've been made aware that there's community sites, so free rapid testing is available every Wednesday from 1 to 4 at Central Lakes College. So that's a community-based free testing site. So we have had some people take advantage of that. It's not tied to us, but that's available in the community. So, questions?
So questions regarding to the rollback or the recommendation? Is that where we're at? Or?
So here's, from what we did, here's a potential phased plan you could look at. The recommendation, if I were to make a recommendation, I would really base it on our trend data. So like we said, going into Christmas break, when we're seeing the positive cases continue to decline, that's a very appropriate question to ask. Do we start to pause then when we see them spike back up? To me, right now, looking at this week, I'd be in pause. But again, when you look at a proposed plan, I got to figure out what direction I'm going. Boom, 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 boom. There are some safe places to start that don't impact direct school and student.
How does that relate to this?
So let's say we make a decision that we're rolling back face covering. So if I look at the first 3, there really wouldn't have an impact with that. If we get to phase 4, or you say, okay, we're no longer going to require face coverings, we're only going to strongly recommend them for our students 9-12 at BHS, BLC, and LEC. Then when we look at that, we really start to look at, we'll stay in that strongly recommend, but when we start to see, like if I go back to this place right here, so we stay in strongly recommend if we're seeing just a few cases in classrooms or student groups in grade level buildings. Where we start to get concerned is when it starts to spike up, so that would cause us. But if we start to see, let's say we have multiple classrooms that have 3 or more positive cases in the classroom, including students and teachers, and we're starting to see that almost 20% of that classroom group or that student population in the building are showing symptoms or being absent, so absenteeism is a good indicator. It would cause to then either consider requiring going back to those, and when we see like the 3 or more, and then we see 20% or more of that absenteeism and symptoms going back to required. So it really, as we start to see the data and as you start to see that trend data spike back up, it's really making us look at how many cases are we having within that grade level group or within that building, how much absenteeism are we having, and then do we go back to requiring it. When you've looked at some of our districts that surrounded us who've been going like they've required face coverings to go back on and off depending on what's happening, it's typically based on that CDC guidance or that quarantine. So you've seen them do a 2-week reset. If we would accept this guidance, it would be a 1-week reset. So it's basically covering, putting the face coverings back on, giving a chance to reset, and then seeing hopefully that the trend will go down. So again, it's really going to be back to when you say making decisions, looking at our localized data. But to tell you what the threshold should be, I don't have that answer. I do not have an answer when it's appropriate to take the face covering off.
And is that what we're discussing, to try to provide some questions or?
So the guidance that was given was you would like to see what a phase back plan would look like.
Okay, if I could just, if you don't mind, then
Yep.
if I could ask, if we were to look at this matrix here as an example, and I don't know that I'd be in too favor of, like, say, an elementary school where this classroom has to wear, I don't think I'd do it by classroom, even though I realize those kids kind of stick together. But even to simplify it, if we looked at it even by building, so if we were to take like Harrison as an example, has 10 classes, 10 sections. And if we, if we looked at, and we said, well, let's say we want to look at the moderate, which is 1 to 2, but let's be conservative and say it's 2. Are we suggesting that, let's say in the case of Harrison, that if we follow this guideline, if there's 20 or fewer positive cases, we would roll it
So the
back?
20 or fewer, that's percentage of like kids that are out with symptoms. So students experiencing symptoms, so when you look at the percentages, that's the symptoms.
So on this graph, you're
Right.
talking,
The right is the
The right is the symptoms
absenteeism.
and symptoms, the left is positive COVID cases. So if we're looking at your example of Harrison, I'll pull up Harrison data. So right now, and you would look at students and staff combined. But right now, when I look at, we're approaching we have 2 students positive. And it looks like 1 staff member positive right now. So you'd have 3 in that building. 2 staff positive.
so we have 3 positive.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly, so again, this is where, to try to do the marker, if you're gonna go by building, what is the magic number?
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get to that same page. So we have 3 positive total. And was this graph positive?
So the graph to the left is positive. The graph to the right is then giving you another data point where you could look at, also paying attention to.
Okay, now I'm following better.
Yep.
So that would be total positive and quarantine?
This would be total positive cases. We're not even talking like symptoms
Right, the
and.
graph on the left is positive, the graph on the right is?
Absenteeism
or
symptoms,
quarantines.
Quarantines.
So take, for example, if you want to just look at a class level. So let's say it's Heidi Hahn's class. I have three or more students in my classroom that tested positive, right? So that would be a high indicator, should be required. Or I'm starting to have, let's say I have 2, but I have 20% of my class that are starting to be showing symptoms or absent, or I have greater than 20%. That's when they're flagging, just like influenza, when you start to see that uptick in positive cases and an increase in students showing symptoms or being absent because of symptoms, do you need to look at requiring a face covering to give them a reset?
Sure.
So that's where you could go by classroom, you could go by building, and there's a lot of ways to look at this.
Yeah, and so what I was just trying to do is get some clarity, at least for all of us, at least for myself. And if we just used Harrison instead of Heidi Hahn's class, Harrison on an actual, we have 3 current positive cases.
Just this week, yep.
And we have how many quarantine?
Now you're gonna make me switch between charts, but I'll get there, so hang on. So if I go to, so here we go,
Okay, so the 3 positive cases at Harrison were identified so far this week.
Correct,
right?
so they're active positives right now, and then if you look at quarantine, we have 11 in quarantine.
Do you have last week's 2?
Last week is, so this only goes to the 7th, right? So this doesn't, you gotta remember, we're always about, when we're reporting out, you're looking at a week behind. So the week of the December 24th to the 31st, we don't have any data because kids are on holiday. So this is really last week's data.
Okay, so if we could go back to this graph, you said 3 and 11, right?
And we were looking, when we established this graph, we're looking at cohorts of 30. So you could calculate that, what does that mean for 30 kids within 5th grade at Forest View? What does it look like for?
Yeah, and I guess what I was looking at is, and I'm just trying to, let's just say we look at the orange, we're saying 2 to 3 cases. If it's 3 cases per classroom, and in Harrison, there's 10 classrooms. If we're just looking at a building level, it would be up to 20 to 30 positive cases for the building, right?
This is meant to look specifically at a building or at a classroom level. This is meant to really, as you start to see, and again, we have that data, you can start to see when you've seen a building sit pretty stable and all of a sudden you see them spike to 6 or 7 positive cases. They're starting to happen across grade levels. So if you'd start to see that happening with various cases at a grade level building, it's giving you a chance to look at the sporadicness of it. Because the ultimate goal is to be mindful of, if we're starting to see an outbreak, start to consider when it gets to this level to make sure if we get here, then there's an additional mitigation strategy where you put the face covering required.
I'm struggling getting here. So what's your recommendation for the rollback?
I think we look at our localized data. So my recommendation is, rather than using the county data that we've been using, the cases per 10,000 like we were, again, this is a decision you as a board, I think, need to make or give us some guidance on. Do you want to do it by grade level bands, meaning early childhood through 4th grade? Do you want to do it by individual buildings? And then, like, I hear you saying, don't do classrooms, do buildings. Well, give us that guidance. And then my recommendation, just as somebody who's lived in all this data for 22 months, like the questions posing when we looked at coming into December and we were seeing a consistent decline in our positive cases across the setting, that seemed like we had very good data and control of that. I would recommend when we start to see a downward trend and they stabilize, that's the appropriate time to consider a phase back, specific to classrooms and students. Because I think you're gonna have a different discussion about staff when you get to the policy guidance. However, I think when you look at, if you want to continue moving that phase back forward, what are the things that you can do that have the least impact on our students? Well, right now, face coverings that are being required for other people coming in because they're renting a facility, they're not having an impact on our direct instruction or student instruction. So
what I'm hearing, what I'm kind of hearing, I'm not hearing by building, I'm hearing when we start to phase back, we do it by grade level up through 8th grade. And the high school would have to be building.
Early childhood to 4th, and then middle school, 5th through 8th, and then high school.
And then
Plus the activities kind of intermixed.
And then the magic, so it's not so much, so to me, like, if I look at this right now, to give you clarification, Director Nelson, like, if we're gonna say this is, we wanna start looking at phasing back, here's a pattern you could follow that mirrors the follow of the availability of vaccination availability to our students. It's also a phase back plan that has direct impact on what's happening with our students within their educational setting, just like we started with activities. So to me, this would be an appropriate way to phase back. The true question is, once you get it phased back, when do you put it back on? Right, because I think at any point in time, like when I see downward trends in our data, if nothing would have changed, let's say nothing would have changed from our status of how we were going from December on, I think I would be sitting here saying, I feel very comfortable. Like, yep, we seem to have good things in place. We're seeing stability in our data. Things are happening that way. We saw a spike after the holiday break. We anticipated that. I don't think we anticipated being at high. But to me, before you'd start to impact the class, it would be really looking at that downward trend in data. Once you get there, then really it is. And that's, to your question, Director Hagelin. So really that chart you're looking at isn't so much of when to take them off. That chart is about when do we all of a sudden feel like we're going to have an outbreak potentially in a classroom or in a building to require to put them back on.
So there's 2 different things we're looking at. First, are we going to start taking them off at this time? And the recommendation is no, because we are seeing a spike, except for maybe we could look at phase 2.
Phase 2 and 3.
I mean, I have no problem with phase 2.
Well, to me, it makes sense. I mean, right now, if you're coming into one of our basketball games, it's strongly recommended but not required. So why shouldn't any other activity
I'm
be
totally
done?
the opposite on that. My focus is in the classroom versus a basketball game. And if we could could we use the high school maybe as an example then? What would the rollback plan on face masks be in the high school? Being that we're saying that's got to be the whole building, which that makes sense to me as well. It's got to be the whole building. So
So you're looking at when can we take them off? You're not.
Yeah, and that also tells us when we have to put them back on.
Right, you're right, it does.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
So when do they come back? Is it on a per 10,000, like we originally had it planned with the county?
No, so
Maybe it
here's-
doesn't make sense, so it's something else. What is that something else?
Well, that's the magic question. I don't have the answer for you. Like my recommendation, so here's every single data point that exists at Brainerd High School since the beginning of the school year. Right? So I think when you see a downward trend in their data, so again, when we look at week 15 to week 17, that was the end of November to going into Christmas break, we are seeing a consistent downward trend in positive cases in students and staff at Brainerd High School. Now we've seen a huge increase. So let's say we took them off on December 15th. Right now, where we're at, more than likely we would be looking at potentially putting face coverings on based on that rubric if it was the week of January 7th, just because of how many positives exist there. So I don't have the answer to a specific, I wish I did. If I did, I'd sell it for $1 million right now. To say this is the exact number of when you're supposed to do it. All I can say is we can respond, now excluding county data, which our original decisions were based upon, we can respond based on our own localized data because we have that specific data since the beginning of the school year on every single student in the building. So, I don't have the recommendation of when they come off. I can tell you, here's things you consider when they put on. But downward trend in data is what I'd recommend, or stability in data. Like the interesting thing about Forest View Middle School.
Let's just stick with the high school for a minute. We've got to get to some conclusion on, because you're looking for some recommendations, right? From the board?
Guidance, correct.
Some guidance?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
So this board then needs to provide some guidance?
Well, and I think one of the things we could do today is we could say, okay, we know there's a spike this last week. We probably, most of us, I shouldn't speak for the board, but I would not be willing to take off masks right now because of what's going on, what you hear on the news with Omicron, and it sounds like it's gonna be short-lived, so I'm hoping, no one knows, no one can predict the future. Like you said, you'd be a millionaire if you could predict the future, but I'm hoping in a month from now, it'll be better, and we'll be able to start using that matrix to take it off. So I think today, we could say, this is good, we know what we're looking at, it's high right now. If we want to look at that community thing, I'm fine with that, but as far as in our schools during the school day, I don't want to take them off right now. I mean, it's spiking, and we want to keep our kids in the school. So I think we could take offline again and maybe have 2 directors like we did in the past come back next time with the recommendation of when can we, and
So here's
it's kind of complicated.
It is, and
Yeah.
so I can tell you right now, again, so this is the overall district picture. We have more positive students and staff right now, last week, than we've had the entire school year. Right? So when you look at, should we be doing it right now? That would be a pause. To me, when you can see a downward trend, the questions were really good from December down.
And it
So-
has to be consistent, I would say. Can't be like this.
So we got kind of 2 layers here, right? You've got a matrix and decision-making model layer that we have to figure out if what they've constructed follows the spirit of what we want to do and how we want to do it. And then you have the data piece that's got to drive it. And I think what we're doing is we're weaving them together, and that's where we're getting derailed a little bit. So my issues are with the data. And it's nothing you guys have done. This, again, fabulous work once again on reinventing a wheel while driving the bus one more time.
Beep, beep.
Yeah. But the reality is, if you look at, the first case of Omicron wasn't even discovered in South Africa until November 26th. So the book full of things we don't know about its impact in a population is much bigger than what we do know. So we don't know if the early studies are showing cloth and paper masks are largely ineffective against Omicron. That you need an N95 properly fitted in the whole 9 yards. We don't know, the early data suggests that the incubation period is shorter. The asymptomatic rates are higher than they were with Delta, that more people that don't have symptoms are walking around with it. So you've got all these different variables that are in place which blow up all of these charts on the data side, right? We don't know what next week looks like. Ordinarily, if it was just Delta, we could look at it and we could kind of go, okay, well, this is what we were doing, this is what happened, and this is what it's going to do. And you could kind of predictively take a pretty good guess at what was going to happen. Omicron isn't even really here yet. Still on the East Coast. So, I don't know exactly what I'm saying in terms of guidance. What I'm saying is, that deciding on how we want to, like to Director Blacklance's comment at the last meeting was, build the path. Then, once we have the path, then we figure out how and where to track the data, and more importantly, when to track the data. And to your point, do you do it when we're at an all-time high in cases, and suddenly this is the moment we experiment? I'm kind of with Director Nelson. I'm like, I don't know if this is the point. Because at the end of the day, I don't know how effective the masks are, but I know a cough is a cough and a sneeze is a sneeze. And I know that I like that glass thing at Subway when I go order a sandwich. So, the reality is there's some logic to the idea of just sort of staying the course, perhaps, until the next time we convene later this month and see where we're going, because I think the data will have a chance to manifest and give us some guidance to give you some guidance.
We'll have 2 more weeks worth of data by that time.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying.
and
And even
here's-
then, that might not be enough,
Might
but at
not
some
be
point.
enough, but
Well, here's-
you'll see trend lines at least.
That's
Oh, and let me throw one more wrinkle in.
Great.
We don't know how effective being vaccinated versus non-vaccinated is versus Omicron. There's all kinds of crazy data all over the chart on that. With breakthrough cases, clearly it's higher than it's been with any other variant, but the symptoms are less.
I do think we have very specific localized data that you can see an impact. So when we rolled back face coverings after school activities, did we see a significant spike in positive cases at the high school? No. So when a decision's made, we're going to have reflective data that should respond to that. So again, if you're looking at where's a safe entry point, I got to escape out of this, and I'm sure people at home are getting dizzy trying to keep up with the back and forth. So if you go back to this, safe influences outside of, these are things that don't have a direct impact on the classroom. I mean, they can, but again, they're not specific to the educational setting that we have.
Phase 2 has no impact.
Except, community, but that's been happening all along.
But it's inconsistent is what I will say. We've already let people not wear masks at our activities in our facilities.
Only for 9-12.
Sure, but that's in our gyms at our basketball games. So
Only
then-
in 9-12. So when it's come to the middle school and elementary.
Sure,
so-
sure, but I'm
yep.
just saying then why wouldn't we let people?
That's again,
know.
when we look at what would be a phase plan based on the mitigation strategies that have changed since August compared to where we're at now, this would be a way to go back. To me, when you hit here, because right now we can safely say we're not having classroom transmission outside of, like we've talked about, early childhood, which, like I said, little 3 and 4-year-olds. They touch a lot of things, they touch each other. It's just a different factor in those little classrooms. We've seen classroom transmission. Outside of that, our data that we've collected, which, like I said, this school year, over 2,100 data points of talking to families and students, we have not seen one student then making another student positive, really having that, except we did have a slumber party back on a volleyball where we could say, nope, those 2 girls, they hung out and they're positive, and it was more than likely from hanging out from that. We're not seeing that transmission. But our data points, we can get that specific. So I do think we have the data to go localized. But to say when the magic is, when do you make that decision? I don't know. We have trend data. You could look at that trend data. To me, the bigger thing is once you take them off, having that clear guidance of, boy, when are we going to determine an outbreak and put them back on? So.
And to me, we had the matrix originally when the face masks are coming off. That got changed, and right today, somebody asked, what's the guideline for taking a face mask off? I don't know. All I know is that you don't have to, at the high school after 3:30, you don't have to wear one. I have no idea. And I don't need any more data. I don't think we need any more data. We've got to make a decision on what that matrix, what guidelines we're going to use. We've got plenty of data. And if it's trend data, then what numbers? What's the criteria? It's got to go down by 2%, 2 per 1,000, 20 per 1,000, 2 weeks in a row. What is that matrix that we can tell our community this is what we're using? And we'll be lucky for 50% right on that. But at least we've got something. Because right now we're like, I don't know. I have no idea. No idea when we're going to pull them.
And again, you have to make a decision. Do you want to do that by grade band? Do you want to do that by building?
And
Do you
I
want to
think
do that by classroom? Do you want to do that by?
Those decisions are, we spend 5 minutes in discussion and we make that decision.
Yeah,
I don't think that's a big one.
I already know what
Yeah.
I like what you outlined. I think the phases, the groupings are right. I don't know if the order is right for me personally. I would maybe go with, I don't know. I'm wondering because what you're saying about 9 to 12 grade students having been able to be vaccinated the longest, they're now also able to be boosted if parents choose to do that. I would almost put that possibly for discussion's sake, would that go before 5 to 8 after-school activities? Because we've already removed the masks for after-school in that grouping, I guess is what I'm saying. You know, then we're not picky, you know, does that make sense? To me,
But
our
I-
next move is the community use and the 9 to 12. I don't have the number in my mind, but I guess to advance the conversation, that's where my mind goes.
And I think that's a really large population, you know, you're talking about the high school. And I would want to make sure that we do have thresholds that we're thinking about that we can tolerate. And, you know, what does that jump in cases or that, you know, decline in cases look like, that we're being proactive instead of reactive.
So do we have, okay, so as far as taking them off, we have the red and the yellow and the green, that little chart you have. Do we have that for school, not community? Do we have that information? The high, substantial, moderate, that's what we need by school or by
Okay,
grade.
so this is specific to when to put them back on. This isn't when to take them off. So again, that's Director Hagelin's question, is he wants to know, when do we take them off? And that's where I'm saying,
Well, can't we use that same matrix to take them off?
Well, if we do,
That's what I would think. Whatever we decide to take them off, it's the same time to put them back on. I don't see that they're two different ones. To me, they're the same. Now, what that matrix is what we've got to figure out. That's what we've got to decide. And we did decide that, you know, a couple months ago.
With the community.
so just something to consider.
But with the community. in
Yeah,
there.
but at that time, so we had solid information, this is what we're going to do, and I understand, you know, if we want to change it, we want to change it, but what is it? And more data is not, it's got nothing to do with more data.
But to me, what decision you make to put them on and off should respond to what data you have. So we have that
Right,
data. So
right,
then
yeah.
the question becomes, what is that threshold? And I don't have the answer. So if there's 3 positive cases at Harrison Elementary, does that mean every kid at Harrison Elementary should have a face covering on? You know, this guidance really is meant to be, when things have cleared off, when do you start to see an uptick of positive cases again? That's what this is meant to be. It's based on an influenza matrix that's been developed by public health. So this isn't something we've created or just pulled out of thin air. So really what you're asking is you want us to create something specific for Brainerd. So if you want us to do this, then to me, if we follow this, 3 or more cases, again, if it's a building, we could calculate it out. And that's actually, if you remember what we did, we actually calculated that out by every single building, what it would mean for positive cases back if we go all the way back to August. So if you want us to get that specific to say, boy, as long as Harrison Elementary stays under 5 positive cases in their total building based on their population, because that's a smaller building, their 5 cases actually calculates out to like 18 cases at Baxter, because that's a larger building. We could clarify and specify that out. So if that's what we're being asked to do, that's the thing. I don't know what that number is.
Because those 3 cases could also be in one classroom. And so you remove face coverings in the entire building, but then you have kids without face coverings in a classroom that have been exposed to 3 positive cases. Yes, we could still strongly recommend to those families that, hey, these were all in your classroom.
But I do think any decision you make, again, you don't want any more data. The data will reflect whatever decision we make.
And then I think we'd have to pick
How many
a day
days
that
of data
decide.
do we have since we came back from Christmas break?
We have, today is Monday, so we have 8 days of data. Really we have 5 days, because
5.
Monday was
We
just
did
a
it
staff
Friday.
day.
Right. Yeah. And I thought we only
But our
reported
calculations were based on Fridays.
Fridays,
So really
right.
4 days.
4 days of data. So we don't have very much data since we came back from Christmas, so.
But it's it doesn't, what's the relevance of that? Let's just say it had been 30 days or 100 days. What's our matrix for releasing?
Do you have a recommendation, Tom? Do you have a number in your head of what it is?
Well, and I apologize that it looks like you sent an email out this afternoon. I didn't see that until I got here today with this information. We had exactly the release, how it was going to come off, and then that got changed. So now You know, now we need to come up with something again.
When you say we had the exact release date identified, are you talking county data?
Yeah, we had the, per the
Okay,
10,000.
and
yeah.
so if you look at, so I'm gonna show you that. So here's our county data. So if you click here to our archive charts, okay, so these are all the archived.
Yep.
Okay, so this is Christmas break, when we had basically no data coming in. So there's 36.8. So if you look at red, so basically the entire school year, we've been in red because we've been looking at it based to that county data. We know that that's now not reflective because of the at-home test kits. So to say we had this released, we did, but the entire school year yet, we hadn't gotten to a point based on those decisions that we would roll back the face covering.
But if you want to use that, you could use that per district cases.
Well, again, it was a decision made by this group earlier that it probably doesn't make sense to use the county data. So now what is the criteria that we're using? That's
I
what we
think we
need.
said it didn't make sense to compare it anymore, but I think the district number is still, we're calculating it the same still, correct?
You can calculate it the
So
same.
is that the data we're gonna use?
Comparing it. I mean, I'm just saying that I don't think that number has changed.
That's the question we're posing to you as the board to give us direction on as a school district of how to move forward. All right, so if we're not gonna use the county data, because we've calculated it to that per 10,000, we do have specific building data. So there are times where buildings are doing better than other buildings, right? If you look at Forest View, there's been a pretty stable force in Forest View when I showed you that data. So if you're saying that's what I want, do you want to do it by building level? Do you want to do it by grade band level? I'm hearing you want to do it early childhood through fourth grade. You don't want to do it by classroom. However, there may be a case where, like we said, typically if it's going to happen with transmission, it's going to happen within the classroom, not necessarily the entire building. So do you want to make a decision that's going to put a face covering back on an entire building when it's really only happening maybe in one classroom?
I didn't hear building, I heard grade level. I heard by
classroom at the elementary level.
We talked about, because we have that availability. So that's the direction we're looking from. We can get the data to make those decisions. What that threshold is going to be, I can't tell you that exact number. That's where I'm looking for guidance on, because now we're changing how we're going to look at the data. What I would recommend is we really look at trend data. So when we start to see our trends going down, just like what's happening at Christmas break, that seems like a really appropriate time to then look at when's the next phase that we can roll back. Then when we start to see it stabilizing, then do we move to the next phase? Because I don't think there's going to be a magic number. I really don't think you're going to be able to pick a number to say, oh, 5 cases, phew, I feel really good about doing that. Because, yeah,
And
if
the
you.
buildings go like this every week. And so we would also have to pick, are we gonna do this every 2 weeks? We do it 1 day a week that we review, lift, and then put back on. Like, it's not as simple as we hit this number and then that's where we stay. It goes like this constantly.
Well, my
Every day.
suggestion, again, is for tonight, we stay as is, except for maybe that one phase 2. We could talk about that. We stay as is. The 2 people that met and go over the specifics of our new requirements for putting back on and taking off, meet again, and in 2 weeks from now, when we have more data, we go through what their recommendation is. That would be my recommendation.
And my recommendation, rather than to try to pinpoint it down to a solid number, would be able to say, when we start seeing, and again, based on if you're recommending by building, when we start to see, so right now, we're still in a face covering requirement. Once we start to see, which we anticipate it will, we knew coming from a holiday break, you're gonna spike. When we start to see if we have 3 weeks of continued downward trend, do you consider a phase removal? I think you need to look at it more on trend data versus a specific concrete number, because like Angie said, it changes overnight.
Okay. That you can discuss and then bring back that recommendation to us in 2
What
weeks.
about community facility use? Do we wanna move forward with that at this time? Releasing the community facility use, non-school sponsored?
Phase 2, okay, let's talk about that. I'm fine with that.
Is that like something at the Get You Ziba, if you have 1,200 people?
Right now in our plan that we've had the Get You Ziba as a separate, just because of the large capacity. So that would be something you have to talk about. We're really talking about facility rental use for outside people coming in. We have a lot of events that come in, from a craft fair to the Trappers Association to, I think we have a takedown competition event that really does not interplay with what's happening with our students and our staff.
So let's say if the choir is performing at the Get You Ziba with a non-school production, we would still have face masks.
To me, that would be a school-sponsored activity.
Yep.
Well, how are we, what is our policy when we say after-school activities? If we have a choir concert, are masks required right now?
In the GZB.
In the GZB, just because you can hold 1,200, there's just a lot of people in there. Outside of that, no on activities we haven't. So, as they've had things in the gyms, things like that.
I do want to, Director Nelson, I'd like to go back to one thing on your suggestion. I don't disagree with the process, but the last time that we reviewed this, it was myself and Director Nelson that were involved.
Director Hagelin.
Excuse me, Director Hagelin. I would like to bow out and make room for a different board member to get in there. My own view on this is that I'm a little compromised in terms of my take on where we're at with masks, and I think we need some alternative points of view to look into it.
Okay.
Yep, and I don't want to be, well, I wouldn't be available anyway the next 2 weeks. I'm either happy to say, here's what I think we should do, but I don't think in contrast to the majority of the board, that makes sense in the viewpoint. Last time I wore a face mask was December 13th, and that was at this board meeting here, and I've been out in the public and restaurants, all kinds of events. So I've got a very tainted viewpoint of this.
If you're going to be out the next 2 weeks, and I'll put myself back in, if Director Hagelin's going to be out, then, but what I would say is I would mirror kind of what he's saying. I mean, we have 4 months of data on what we think happens when we have masks on. We have no idea what happens if we try taking them off. I realize with Omicron sweeping the nation, maybe this week isn't the week.
Right.
But I keep going back to what we talked about the last meeting. We should reach a point where if we have the ability to reset, we have ability to track trends, and if the trends get out of control, how hard is it to put them back on again? And then, it would be an interesting experiment in seeing how to measure the efficacy of masks versus no masks. Right now, we don't have that.
Okay,
I think
so,
one thing, and I'm just gonna point this out when we start, since we haven't really talked a whole lot about the testing and face coverings policy, one thing, if we do roll back with staff, that's gonna be interesting. Because if people who have not submitted their vaccination have to wear face coverings, that's gonna be me running around the building, not identifying people because it's private information, but identifying people because I have to. So just something to keep in your mind.
So I can tell you that
With the staff side.
yeah. So the surrounding districts around us are very much struggling with that because they haven't had it. And now there's a mandate that staff have to have it. So policing that and protecting private health information is interesting. My recommendation from this presentation, this is a phased plan that you can look at of how you start to roll them back, just laid out phase 1 through 7. How I would make decisions of when would be based on trend data. So when you start to see that trend data come down and stabilize, again, I think we have, just from the examples, we can see where it comes down and when it stabilizes. When you see that, that would be the opportunity then to look at the next phase. I would strongly discourage between picking just a flat number, because some of those flat numbers, I mean, we have triplets in classrooms. So if a set of triplets goes out, does that now put a face covering on the entire building? I would really not want to get specific to a number, really looking at that trend.
And that's why I think you need to talk with 1 or 2 school boards offline and come up with that. Because we can't do it tonight.
Let us know.
We won't
Board
get there.
members will be in attendance.
So do we have any motions?
Are we moving forward with the community events?
Oh, I guess
then?
we don't.
We didn't ever
Yeah.
determine that.
Do we have any thoughts on the community facility phase 2? You want to wait and do it in 2
I
weeks?
don't think it's clear how it's divided yet. I think we need to figure out something with the Gitchizeba too, and I think if that's the only thing we're gonna look at, then I think we wait and have that decided for the 24th as well.
I'm fine. So leave everything as is, then I guess we don't need a motion. And Director Boyles, you're willing to be on that? Is there someone else that would want to be on that?
I'd be willing to be part of that.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
I think you're next for policy.
So number 3, then we'll table that.
Tabling that, yeah. You're tabling number 3. And then we also have to talk about this first reading of the model policy, which you have kind of hinted at.
Yep, so I presented the MSBA model policy 491. We do with the ETS have an option of mandating vaccinations or providing this alternative where you either submit your voluntary record of vaccination or you're subject to testing and face covering rules. At this point, we recommend that we go with the latter. So we're not imposing a mandate for everyone to get vaccinated as that's their personal choice, but to still adhere to the outline of the ETS with the next steps and what that means. So as I'm sure you've read and I'm sure you've heard the news and kind of know the gist of what's going on, what we understand is if the Supreme Court comes back voiding the federal OSHA, then the Minnesota OSHA would then be voided as well because it's by reference. So we're still awaiting that. Currently, we've sent out a voluntary vaccination form where they can upload their vaccinations. Those are coming in steadily. We do anticipate we have a great number of employees that are not vaccinated. So we're currently creating plans to provide options for employees to test weekly. This policy kind of outlines all the provisions of the ETS, gives definitions, information about what is considered fully vaccinated, which is just the 2 series for Pfizer or Moderna, or the 1 Johnson & Johnson does not include the 3rd dose or the booster. So we're collecting all of those. The testing, weekly testing has to be done within 7 days of reporting to work. This includes our subs, which is another interesting caveat, because those individuals will also have to submit within 7 days of reporting to their assignment a negative test if we do not have a vaccination record on hand. So we're working on some on-site options, getting community options available for all staff to make this as easy and painless as possible, and creating policies or procedures, I guess, on what that will look like. We do not have to have that in place until February 9th. So we got a little bit of time. We're working steadily on getting all that stuff going. As I said a couple times, the face coverings are required as of today for anyone who has not submitted a vaccination record. Since we're under the face covering mandate, that really hasn't been applicable to us because we're all required to wear face coverings at this time. Other provisions in here, we're required to provide up to 4 hours of paid leave if individuals are choosing to get their primary doses of the COVID-19 vaccination. And then they can also utilize up to 2 work days of accrued paid leave immediately following the doses if they experience side effects. So that's of their accrued paid leave, whereas the 4 hours is the district needs to provide that time. There is, as always, the option for employees to request an accommodation through the Human Resources Department in regard to any of the requirements under this, and those will be considered case by case. If someone does not bring in a negative test result, they will be removed from the workplace until they can produce a negative test result. There's certain specifications on who observes the test, how it's brought forward, how we keep the test results, lots of different mitigation stuff in that. All new hires must be in compliance, so as we bring people on, we'll be discussing this with candidates. Confidentiality and privacy obviously has been explained to staff, and discrimination and retaliation provisions as well. I have sent a copy of this to all staff, what was being presented in front of the board. We've also provided frequently asked questions about the temporary status. We're required to also let them know key things to know about the COVID vaccines, information for employees on penalties for false statements and records, and then the workers' rights under the COVID-19 vaccination and testing ETS. So that's all been sent out. We're in complete compliance of the OSHA requirement at this time. We're just going to kind of wait and see what happens with the Supreme Court ruling while continuing to get prepared for February 9th if and when it comes.
So we need to approve this model policy because.
We have permission to just approve this with 1 reading. We believe that we have the time to do the 3 readings like we normally do and to work through this process. Okay. And so what we're asking for tonight is approval of the first reading of this policy.
Okay. And if there's any questions, one thing that I did move away from the MSBA model policy is in regard to face coverings, because we do have the face covering policy. So I wanted to make sure that those were in alignment. So I really used our face covering policy because they're still accepted under the ETS. Put those in these so it wasn't conflicting information between the two policies. And then I referenced that policy kind of throughout. So just FYI.
Okay, so I need a motion for the approval of the first reading of policy 491.
So move.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a first from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklands. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions. Like the two of you, I'll be anxious when we don't have to talk about this new mandate here. It's a standard agenda on our Monday staff meeting within our businesses. The idea that you don't need to be tested for 90 days after being positive, I had not heard, is that?
That's true. Yep.
That's an alternative or something that's coming from
Yes.
OSHA as well?
Yep. So I think that's in here. If it's not.
Yeah, no, it's written in here.
Okay,
Yeah, I had
so-
not heard about that
Yep.
prior, okay.
And we've done that ongoing because that really exempted people from even the old close
Yeah.
contact rules. So 90 days, and then
Okay.
after that, then we would implement the testing. So tracking, this is not going to be a fun exercise, but we can certainly get it done. But yeah, that is one way
And then
to be outside the testing.
The weekly testing, and maybe I didn't catch it in here, but is that something that staff would have to do on their own, or will we be able to provide the free testing?
We're trying to
Rapid
provide
testing.
free testing.
Okay.
We're trying to provide free rapid testing and kind of looking at what that looks like right now. We have received, or one is on its way of this Veritor, but we have to, in order to enact this, we have to apply for a CLIA waiver so that we can administer the test, because part of this is they have to either be supervised by a healthcare professional, either virtually or in person, taking the test. And there has to be a documented, like, I can see that you are negative, take a picture, file it.
So that's, we're looking to remove every barrier possible for our staff. And so when we look at the BD Veritor tests that we're getting them, they're confirmed and they're coming. That is a test that, if we apply for the CLIA waiver, it could be one that we could use as part of this testing. They get the results, it automatically comes on their phone or their computer, they can then automatically submit that result. But it has to be observed. And so depending on what test you do, there's different rules that apply to the different tests that you're accessing. But our ultimate goal is to remove those barriers for as long as we can for staff. We're not required to with this, but our goal is to do that for our staff.
And they certainly wouldn't have to do that either.
No.
But yeah, we're looking at different options either before or after school where it wouldn't interfere with their day.
Yeah, that would be great, yeah.
Yeah,
So you have some time to do all that.
a little bit, yep.
Yep, February 9th.
And then just real quickly, and again, I haven't had a chance to look through this, but in perusing through it, and item 4, the last sentence, that it says will be subject to the regular testing and face covering requirements of this policy until fully vaccinated. And I would suggest just rephrasing that because they may never, someone may never choose to be fully vaccinated.
Then they have to continue with the testing
Right,
requirements as well.
right.
Where are you? You
Um,
said 4, but on which?
8,
Oh, here we go, the first page.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
How about unless submission of vaccination record or
Yeah,
something
so
like
just,
that?
yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep, I can make that change.
Yeah, and I don't know how in the world you or anyone with 100 or more employees are gonna be trying to police something that's confidential information.
That's,
Well,
so,
that's where the face covering
where the
comes
face
into
covering,
play,
yeah.
because that's
Well,
really
it
where.
does for this organization, but it doesn't for the business world or others that don't
Right.
require that.
Yeah, and we'll have to,
that's where it makes a unique, so I think there's two discussions you're having. One, I mean, before we were talking students and staff, now I think you're having two separate discussions, students, staff.
Because
So-
I really am worried if we do pull back for staff, it's gonna be a discrimination suit waiting to happen.
We
Even
have
though
the
they're-
option of mandating masks for staff.
You have any option you vote
It
on?
currently is, and so,
No, I mean staff only. Like if we pull back for the students, right? That's an option that could be on the table.
yeah.
yep, I think it might
That's
be.
what currently I would recommend until we hear, at least until we hear if this is gonna continue.
Did you say you currently would or would not?
Would,
You would recommend just making it mandatory for staff?
Well, I'm just saying, as we look at the rollbacks, that the rollbacks wouldn't apply to staff.
Because of
point.
this, if this
Because
stays in place.
As soon as we do
And the
that,
liability we'd
it's
have
like,
with
oh, they're not
confidentiality.
vaccinated. I mean, there's gonna be lots of icky stuff potentially happening.
That's right.
But once again, it's not,
Right now.
as Director Haglund said, that's not anything that companies all over the country aren't going to have to deal with.
Exactly. It's, yeah, this isn't an
But
isolated
I'm talking
problem.
about us, so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And our lean machine of your team.
And it's gonna be a nightmare.
Yes.
I mean, and so this is, I mean, I can't give enough compliments right now though, but our nursing staff. So we made a decision last year to go back, or we made a decision to go to one district nurse and then put a nurse in every building. That has been a gift when you're trying to manage all these things and to be able to have that, you know, I'm not a health professional. So we have that district nurse and we have nurses in all of our building who are really talking to these families and have been able to give that information. When you now look at having to have that health professional on site to monitor testing, the fact that we have the staffing where businesses don't have nurses, the gift is a school district, we do. So there's things that we can respond to because of our unique staffing. We'll be having a meeting with our nurses tomorrow. Their workloads are immense. This is just gonna put another layer to it, so.
yeah, it's another federal mandate that's unfunded again.
Well, the good news is we do have some testing dollars.
So we are like, we have testing funds, so we are
Well,
looking
I
at.
mean, just on a global bigger picture.
Yep.
It is a-
Another
But that's where our
unfunded
system,
mandate.
I mean, I was just trying to say from a school perspective, that's where we are at a little bit more
Of an
better point
advantage, yeah.
to have access to that ability. So.
And we don't know what will happen yet, so we need to just approve the first reading and.
Yep.
But we have to move forward as if it's gonna stay unless we hear differently.
Yep, so we have a first from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklance. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, now we have a review and update of the public comment guidelines as determined by the Board of Education. So after our last few meetings, you have it at your table. I think everyone has this, does everyone have this? Yeah. Talk about this, and if we want to make any changes to basically the procedures. I don't think it's the policy. I think it's just the procedures. So if you look at the procedures that are in your board book. And my thoughts, I'll just start it because I wrote a couple of things down. The written request to speak, so that's this card, and Janet has revised it. The top one is the new one. So we know if it's a non-ISD community member, because at the last meeting, we had someone from southern Minnesota come and take quite a bit of time up, and we didn't even know who he was or where he was from. So we added the non-ISD community member. Also, my recommendation is, like I did today, is I take these, so I make sure I have the information needed before I call him up or I ask him or her that question. But I would personally like to have a deadline that they have to have the comment cards in prior to the start of the meeting. Which makes sense to me. So there's this, that we would maybe change that idea. And then the time limit, this is a minimum of 3 minutes at the board chair's discretion. So like tonight, we had 4 people there. If I wanted to give them each 4 minutes or it would be a little bit lax on that, we could do that.
I think you should stay.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that either.
I think you should,
Because you don't, just because I happen to show up on a week when it's a slow business day, you know, the fact that my voice doesn't have the same weight as somebody else's or has more.
I just know sometimes it gets a little short for people, so. When we have 20 people, I wouldn't want it to be any
Well,
longer.
this
but-
coming from somebody who can't clear his breath in less than, or clear his throat in less than 3 minutes, and, you know, you can get a lot said in 3 minutes. We had several eloquent speakers tonight that managed it in 3.
Okay. Okay.
That's my own take.
And first I like this, I think these are nice. I also agree, Ruth, I think that the chairperson should have these. I like also you can fill it out before the meeting. I'm not a fan though, and I've said this before, of this hard 3-minute rule, because you get that 2.5 minute kind of reminder that disrupts the flow of the speaker. It just you know, it just throws a monkey wrench in it. I'm not a, if someone's willing to come and speak and they're gonna, you know, go for 3 minutes, 20 seconds or 4 minutes, I'd rather leave that up to the, being managed by the chair, to the chair's discretion versus a hard stop at 3 minutes, because there's been some times where I wish that we would have let them finish. They were about to be done, and I would love to have heard what, you know, their ending piece was versus you got 3 minutes. And I'd rather leave it up to the chair to manage myself.
And I'd have like a timer up here, and if it's getting long, or if,
Yeah, all I ever did was just,
Or whoever,
I looked
yeah.
at my computer and the clock, and, you know, if they're, yeah.
Well, I'll just say
I'd
one more
rather
time,
see that.
that's arbitrary. Arbitrary never works for me.
Neither.
It's hard to be objective, I think, in that case.
maybe we just don't have the warning. Just tell them at the beginning, you have 3 minutes, and we'll tell you when it's
Once
up.
the beeper goes off, you're done.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
like-
might be less confusing to do that.
Again, I'm subject to other people's comments. I'm just voicing my opinions on this.
Seems to me there should be some sort of display we can come up with too, where there's a very clear timer right in front of the person and they can moderate themselves glancing at the time.
That could be something we could look into in the future, yeah.
Rather, because I agree with Tom, it is a little disruptive when you talk, I mean, we need to do it, but then somebody says 30 seconds, you know, it draws all of our attention to whoever said that.
Again, I understand the spirit of it, but if you have a night like we've had in the past where we've had 22 speakers, which ones do you give 4 minutes to and which ones do you give 3
Oh, no, I
minutes to?
wasn't saying on
Or do we
that.
just bring pillows?
Everyone would have 3 minutes, but when we just have a few, you know, I would have all of them up here, and, okay, we only have 3, we don't have to really have a time limit. Or we, you know, you can have up to 5 minutes that night.
But again, it gives more more attention to some nights because there's less than on any.
Yeah, but usually
I
on the
think you have
nights
to
when we have a lot,
consistent.
they're all talking about the same thing. So it's more the people that are talking that I want to give more time to it, more unique reasons for being up there than
And
if they're all
typically-
talking about the same thing.
Typically be on our agenda for a presentation then.
That's true.
So if 3 minutes is plenty of time to make a comment.
And I'll say again, public input is great. It really is. It gives us a thumb on the pulse of what is concerning to people, and maybe that's the avenue and medium in which people want to contact us. But we all have email addresses and we all have telephones.
Right, and to remind everyone that the board does not have to have public comment at all, but we have all sincerely said that we want to hear from the public at these board meetings, so I think we're doing good on this, and if 3 minutes is the appropriate time, I'm fine with that. Just thought I'd give that option. I do think it helps a lot to have it up here, and so then if we can eventually get to 3, the 3-minute clock up there, that'll help too.
So the policy 206 that's on here for action, the updates are just what we see on this comment card.
No, 206.
Yeah, I don't think there's any changes in the actual
I'm sure what
policies.
206 is on here. We aren't.
Well,
not on
nothing
our
to the
agenda,
policy at all.
Right.
Yeah, that one's
Just
the one
the
about
guidelines.
disclosing personnel information or specifically talking about a specific individual. I don't believe we have any discussion for changing that.
Yeah.
I think the changes that you've made are just to the card.
And this would be an automated experience, you said, so people could have it in earlier before the meeting?
No, they have to come here and do it, but
Okay.
anytime, my thought was anytime prior to the start of the meeting.
I like that.
Okay.
I like the idea that once the meeting starts, you
Yes.
can't get a wild hair to just suddenly decide you want to speak. If
Right.
you came to speak, you came to speak.
Right.
If you showed up a little late, like if you were coming and you showed up late.
People need to be here on time, so, so can we make that
Add
change to the
we'll add that to
guidelines?
the card as well.
And then in the guidelines, it has to change.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, I still like the idea. I like the idea of letting non-community members speak. I mean, obviously, this is the honor system. I don't know that we're going to know if we get another adventure like we had last meeting or not.
Right.
It's going to, they can write whatever they want on the card, so.
And people can come in anytime after what time to fill out a public comment card?
I always have the boardroom open a half hour prior to the start of the meeting.
Okay, is that when comment cards?
But the comment cards are available all day.
Right, so they could,
I've got them all day.
okay.
Can they be submitted electronically as well? Could we do that? So that someone, let's say in the case that you're gonna be running 10 minutes late before public comment, you wanna speak, but, rather than having to stop in, can we just electronically allow for that?
I'm sure we can figure something out to have it electronically.
I'm just hesitant to, I keep hearing that we just really wanna hear from our public. But boy, you gotta follow this strict guideline and box, and you gotta be done in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think it's that difficult. If you
Well,
really want to speak.
but the tone has really changed, I believe, this year, I think largely because of the restrictions that we put into place. Because we've cut people off when they were just about done. And I think that's
And
created.
I've tried really hard not to do that when they're just about done.
And then we've
it's
had
not-
people
it's-
that act like they're just about done and then go on to speak
Right.
for 3 more minutes.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, you can cut that whichever direction you want to, in my opinion.
That's, I'd rather
Well, is
leave
there a
it.
compromise? Can the person turn in a comment card up until the public comment time begins? So then as long as you're
Kind of
here
what
by
we've
the
been doing.
time.
What we have been doing.
Right, but we're saying tonight that we cut it off before the meeting. I think as long as someone's in the room by the time public input begins, they should be able to hand in a
If we have
comment
somebody
card.
on staff that's willing to do that, continue to do that, I guess I'm not too wrapped
That's how
on the
we've been
axle on
doing
that.
it.
I
So
think that's what we've always been doing.
I'm not as concerned about, because I agree, somebody might need to get off work at 6 o'clock and then get here by 6:10 before public comment begins. I think if they're here by the time the comment period begins, they should be able to hand in a card.
I would prefer at the beginning of the meeting, but, so I can have them up here, but if you want to do it until the public comment.
We also have the
begins.
option where people can email Janet what they would say if they, let's say somebody couldn't come. I had this many years ago with a book issue where I was traveling on business and not able to make the board meeting, so I sent, in lieu of public comment, I sent Chair Hagelin at the time an email and it was read.
Yeah, we didn't want to get, that kind of goes back to the, I'll say the Vox back days back with the dispatcher. We don't want to get into that because we'll be inundated.
Okay, fair enough.
And
But
I mean, you're on this slope, right? So you gotta figure it out. It's the
Well,
same
yeah.
concept.
I think if
but
we can come up with an online one, that would be great, and then we can have it stopped.
the form,
by-
just the request to,
Yeah,
The request to speak where they
Yeah.
submitted ahead of time.
yeah.
They don't have
I
to
guess my
submit
only
what they're
concern
gonna
is
speak.
that takes somebody's staff time. I mean, and we already have a staff that has,
yeah, and maybe
More than
we don't
enough
want
to
to do that. I don't know. I just,
I still think we can just accept them till staff public input time like we have.
give that a shot
Because
first.
if we have the people out here picking them up, like that gentleman tonight, he brought it in at the end. And I know it's easier if they're all there at the beginning, but
well, we'd still have them because they would have to submit it by the time public comment begins. So even if you're having them walked up to, as we call up our first person, you still know how many we have at the beginning of public comment.
yeah.
I mean, to Tom's point, I think we want to, I think we need to have rules. It's a meeting. There needs to be a set way to behave and do business at a meeting, but we don't want to be so restrictive that people can't be heard.
Yeah, I don't think either way is so restrictive, but I'm fine with up to the start of public comment meeting. So they have 10 more minutes to get here. Okay, so do we need a motion for that to approve the change in the comment card? I guess is the only thing.
You're talking about just this?
Yeah, we probably don't. Okay. Okay. So we'll go on to informational if there's nothing else to be said on that. We have Brainerd Public Schools Foundation. Jana.
Sure, so we had a meeting today, and of course, we're so lucky to have our public school foundation with their largest function is providing scholarships for our high school seniors as they head off to their next endeavor. And the scholarship application is open right now, so this is kind of alert, to parents and seniors who might be listening that go and fill in that application. It's due by February 28th, and it's so simple. You fill out one application and it matches you with any scholarship opportunity that you might be eligible for. So just highly encourage those seniors to get going on that. We also have our big event coming up, which again raises money for all the great things that our public school foundation does for our school. The big event is on February 5th I was waiting for a shift in my calendar that just happened, so I sat and bought my tickets at the beginning of the meeting. That there are 17 left. So if you want a ticket and you don't have one yet, you better get going because they are going to sell out, I think, soon. And you can just go to the Public School Foundation website. For those who might not be so sure they want to be in person, they are also offering the Party in a Box, so you can still support the school foundation and be virtual and support the event and have fun with people at home. So, and the other event coming up is Pints for a Purpose at Jack Pine on February 2nd, and that's where you can pick up your Party in a Box. So if you do request that and pay for that, then you can pick it up that evening. Or the raffle tickets are for sale that night too, so it's just another way to support the event if you can't be there in person. And that's what I have.
Okay, wonderful. So everyone remember, February 5th, 17 tickets left for the big event. Equity Advisory Task Force update. Director Blackburn.
All right, we met on December 14th. It seems like a lifetime ago.
It does.
No, but we had the opportunity to discuss our book study that we've been going through as a committee as part of our committee development, our self-development. And then we also were able to discuss the in-service day that took place in November, which was a fun conversation because that part of that in-service day was a student panel that was able to share with staff some of their experiences, and they're able to hear the student voices and perspectives, which it was interesting to hear, and I'm excited that they had that opportunity to be able to share and most importantly be heard. Another piece that we discussed in our committee meeting was future trainings for staff. And that includes implicit bias training for the staff as well, or paraprofessionals are up front. And then also we were able to provide or discuss how we would provide some aftercare. That's my word, I guess, but a way to follow up with the in-service day that we had. So basically, how will we do some follow-up with that so we don't just have the training and then leave it at that. So it was a good conversation, but that's still a process that we're wanting to move forward with. That's right. We meet again in January.
And we set up.
Yeah, tomorrow. Oh, goodness. Yeah.
So that begs one quick question. I noticed that project oversight meetings are on our future meetings, but the equity task force ones are not on there. Is there a reason why we don't put those out before we meet?
It's on there.
Or did I miss it? Oh, I did. It's right there, January 11th. I'm sorry. Never mind. I'm going to learn to read. Should have gone to school.
There's a lot of meetings there too.
Yeah.
Should have gone to Brainerd.
Director Blackburn's
That's your guy. What are you going to do?
Should have gone to Brainerd.
The community meeting?
The community meeting?
Yeah.
That got pushed back into spring semester.
Oh, because of, okay. Okay, so we don't have a date for that yet. Okay.
Well, not that I recall right now.
Okay.
Aaron might be quickly texting me and calling that right now, but not that I have right up here.
Okay. Okay, so that ends your report?
Yes, that ends my report.
Business Services report.
All right, so in your board packet is the enrollment report. I was just gonna note that we were down 17 from last month, and I looked at last year's report, and we were down 26 in the prior year. So we were down more, and then also comparing to budget, we were down 55 last year, whereas right now we're up 54 compared to budget. And we'll be looking at that in the budget revision, the ADMs, so we'll see how much closer we can get that when I present the budget revision. Any questions on the enrollment report? Okay. Financial report is also in there. You'll see that we're tracking pretty much on as the same as last year in the general fund. In the food service fund, we are higher, but 2021 was an anomaly. When you look at 1920, we were at about 34.89%, which is right in line with where we're at this year. And then same with community ed, we were at 33.64, so we're a little bit under what we were in 1920, but it's because we still aren't, fully up and running in community ed. So Another item I wanted to note, you guys approved the levy on the December 13th board meeting. I've never had this happen, but due to the debt issuance we had, there's actually a reduction in the levy. So it went down $2,385.09. And so I'll have to recertify the levy, and there's a form for Jana to sign. But since it's not more than what our limit was, there's no other formal action needed. It's just noted in the minutes, and we'll re-sign the form. Just an FYI on that. And that was due to the better interest on the bonds, the interest rates. The financial report and check register, just wanted to give you a heads up with the meetings going to once a month. They'll actually be a month later. So for example, December will be on January 24th, January 24th, but then February there will not be a report, and then March would actually be January's, due to the timing that we get statements. So we don't have statements in time for that second Monday meeting, so there'll be a little bit more of a delay in there as I present the financial and check registers. And then the last topic was the work session. So when I presented in June the budget, there was a question of like, could we have some sort of work session before we get presented the budget? And I wanted to just propose, could we do for this budget revision something prior to January 24th? I don't know what your expectations are, how much to go into it, but I present a budget document that's a lot more detailed than normally at the board meeting. I just give kind of a summary, but at the work session, I could go through the budget document if you'd like, maybe a half an hour, I'm not sure, depending on your questions. The other option is potentially January 19th. I know sometimes we do the meetings Wednesdays at noon. So just kind of looking for your feedback. Next week would be a little bit too tight to try to schedule something as far as, or I should say this week, next week or prior to the 24th board meeting. So thoughts, or I also just was wondering too, or was that more for just the annual budget? Like, were you thinking, prior to June's meeting, you would like a work session on the whole budget? Throwing it out there for thoughts.
I'm not sure where this idea of the workshop came from. But.
When I presented in June, I think you had brought up it would just be nice to get more information prior
for the
to
annual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but not this one. Okay.
You're not talking about the. Yeah.
No, this is my revision. So at the revision, I normally look at ADMs, our student count, and adjust based on that, and then staffing. At the snapshot in time in June, it's based on what we're expecting, whereas right now we know who we've hired, and then I adjust the budget based on our current staffing and present that. So if you're comfortable with just me presenting that night, I'm totally fine with that. Or if you wanted some sort of session prior to it, I'm fine with that too. Or even just visiting with Kevin is the finance lead. I could make sure to meet with him prior to the board meeting.
That might be a good idea.
That might be a good idea.
Doable. Yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, and school finance is quite complicated, so if any of the newer board members want more time with Marcy, you should set up.
Yes.
Because
please, anytime.
I do like the idea, to Tom's point, of having more time prior to the budget. So, but it'd be wise to maybe start looking at calendars now.
Okay.
Spring gets busy.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Especially our spring that we're going to have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the superintendent's report.
Right, just a couple of things. It was too cold for the photograph tonight, so we're going to hope that on the 24th that it's a little bit nicer. And why don't you plan to come at 5:45 to take the updated board picture with our new board member in that picture. Also, we talked about that the equity task force is tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and then members of the board will be going down for the MSBA conference. Tomorrow night, Sarah and Jana and I will be at phase 1 training, and I'll be speaking on school board superintendent relations and expectations of communication back and forth. I looked in my notes, and I've done that about 4 different times in my career, so that was kind of fun to to see that, got to do that again. Phase 2 will be the next day, and then on the 12th, a couple more board members will be coming. I want to remind everyone that a quorum of the board will be together during this conference at times that we're eating and so on. And so just to make sure that we continue to make that announcement so the public is aware of that. Also, January 17th, we have a staff in-service day again and project oversight on the 18th. And hard to believe, but on the 21st of January, we're half done with this school year already. So next time we meet, we'll be starting our second semester. That's all I have tonight.
I was going to mention on the project oversight, I won't be here to attend, so if somebody else wants to attend.
Okay. On the 18th, okay. All right.
Okay. So I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. First from Director Blacklance and a second from Director Spear. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign, motion carries. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Good meeting.